Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Tower of Babble podcast. As always, I am Julian Mush. I'm joined by Jeremy Cozier.
Hello.
Making me, the suspense is killing me. And today we're going to be talking about none other than the long anticipated. I think this is a movie that we've been looking forward to most for probably since it's been announced. And that, of course, is
the second it was announced.
Yeah, we're like, I need to know every single detail about every single thing that about this movie, and honestly, I say that, but I didn't actually get spoiled very much, outside of the fact that the trailers, I think, spoiled probably too many things. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. We're going to be talking about, of course, we're talking about The Batman, written and directed by Matt Reeves, starring Robert Pattinson, Zoe Kravitz, Jeffrey Wright, Colin Farrell, Paul Dano, John Turturro, Andy Serkis, Peter Skarsgård. Skarsgård is in there. You wouldn't have expected that. There's a lot.
He's fantastic in this movie.
Yeah, there is a lot.
Everyone is
to talk about. And I'm not going to beat around the bush here, but I will just quickly say before we get into anything, follow us on Twitter at ToBabblecast. There is so much conversation going on around the Batman on Twitter right now. It's, I think, a lot of fun. It's mostly positive. There's a little bit of, I think, we're slowly growing out of it. There's a little bit of stuff still that lingers, I think, a little bit in the DC fandom on Twitter. But overall, I think it's mostly positive and a lot of fun. And I've been in there talking about what we might see next in a sequel. Sorry?
You've been in there in the trenches?
I've been in the trenches. Yeah, that's right. But only talking about positive stuff. And like I said, like what can we do for the next? What's the future of the Batman franchise and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really excited to talk about that. We'll talk about that closer to the end of this episode. But if you want to listen to everything that we do, head over to towerbabble.ca to find our archives and all the links to all the podcasts we do. And if you want to support the show, head over to patreon.com/towerbabblecast, where you'll find that we do a monthly bonus show, the Film Club. We didn't really theme it that well. I mean, I guess you could say we did a Fincher movie last month. We did Gone Girl, and of course, this movie, The Batman's heavily inspired by Seven. I think that's not a surprise at all. And so, I mean, there is a bit of a theme there. But either way, we do once a month. The Gone Girl was last month. A lot of fun. Jeremy, what movie were we doing this month? I completely forget. Do you remember?
I feel like we're doing. Isn't it not Seven? I thought we were doing.
Is it?
Seven.
If it's Seven, then I'm even stupider because that's funny. That no way. Is it? Hold on, looking here. There's no way. I'm just gonna double check because I don't want to sound dumb on our own show. It's Fracture, Jeremy.
Oh, right.
2007.
I think we were gonna do that one, but then we started talking about Fracture, and then none of us have seen it or something like that, so we chose it.
So Fracture is a Gregory Hoblet film. I always want to say Hobbit. That L is like hidden right there, and it's like the Hobbit obviously is a word that we're all familiar with, and I just want to say that all the time. Anyway, we're gonna talk about the Batman. Enough of this preamble. Let's get into it. Jeremy, how many times have you seen it so far?
Twice.
I've also seen it twice. I saw it Sunday, and then I saw it again Monday. We're recording today is Tuesday.
Back to back.
And then Jeremy, I mean, it's a little funny because I saw it the first time when I was in Raleigh, and then I came back and I saw it, in IMAX yesterday. And I saw my first screen, and I saw at the Alamo Drafthouse. This is a movie theater chain in the States that I've always wanted to go to. Like I'm so happy that I was able to experience it. And I got to say the best part about the whole Alamo thing, the reason I brought up Seven, is because they do this like whole pre-show scenario before the movie actually starts. It's not just a bunch of ads. It's like this whole curated experience. So they were playing a bunch of it's funny. There were ads, but they were old commercials for like old Batman toys from like the 60s and 70s and 80s. And there's one about like these like Batmans that stretch, the ones that have magnets in their hands and stuff. It was cool. But then they also had a little kind of like mini podcast talking about what are the villains they'd like to see brought into the future of this Batman franchise, all that kind of stuff.
Who's they?
who the Alamo Drafthouse puts it
People.
together. Yeah. Pretty sure it's a name we're familiar with from the film Twitter space, but I don't remember his name off the top of my head. And it's really fun, and I really appreciated that they really take the movie experience really super seriously. They also, I saw it at a brunch screening, so I saw it at like 10 a.m. I had I had food and drinks, and it was great. I would highly recommend if there's an Alamo near your place, if you should definitely check it out. I wish we had something like that here. And then I saw it again in IMAX, and I'm glad I got to do that too because the sound was just that much better, and the screen is just that much bigger. And I got to say though, I think our IMAX, Jeremy, is looking a little dated. We need some better digital projection or something because it's a little blurry at times. But I didn't think it needed to be blurry. Yeah, after watching it on both things.
I thought it was pretty clear, especially going to Grant Park my second day, which I thought they had a better projection, but it seemed a little off, maybe in terms of the brightness or something. I don't know.
That's the thing with the IMAX stuff. It's like I feel like it could be brighter, and it could be sharper. But at least our IMAX. I'm not going to speak for others, but how many times? Like, how quickly did you see it? You saw it Thursday, and then you saw it again on the weekend.
No, Thursday and then Friday.
Okay, so you also saw it back to back.
I pretty much always buy for big movies. Like if the tickets are going to sell out, I usually try to get two times back to back, like the very first evening and then like a Friday.
Yeah, I
Friday.
Absolutely. I mean, there's just this movie. I don't love seeing movies like back to back very often. And okay, so Marcos in the chat. Loved having Marcos in the chat here. And I missed your first comment talking about battling out in the trenches with us about this movie because it is very good. And you're mentioning here that the fan first screening I went to at IMAX, and it was definitely better than the regular showing I went to. I mean, I think IMAX is probably always going to be better than just a standard showing, but if there's sometimes where you get better projection technology and it's just a bit sharper and clearer. And I think honestly, the sound for this movie is so important. You have to have really great sound. And
yeah, I think I've never this is the first time at IMAX where I think I truly noticed a major difference. And
from the sound side standpoint,
from just sound perspective, and especially during that Batmobile chase sequence,
right?
Just ridiculous how loud and you could hear the vibration. I was just loving it during those moments.
The sound of the car is just so, I don't know how else to describe. It's so throaty. It's got this rumble to it. It makes you want to go out and buy a Challenger or something.
Right.
Very specific reference. Anyway, where do we begin with this movie? I think let's start at before the actual movie itself. Let's talk about. I want to set the stage a little bit here. And
so we're setting the stage even more.
Yeah, because I think what's important to reference here is that everyone has a different type of Batman that they vibe with, separately, differently, right? Like some people really like a really a more Dark Knight Returns style Batman. Some people, vibe more with the 60s style stuff, and, more power to you. If that's the case, you're not going to be getting a lot of that, here. But there's a lot of different types of Batman. People I like someone who's a really good Bruce Wayne, or I prefer, people talk about who's a good Batman versus who's a Bruce Wayne, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and we've all decided that Val Kilmer is the best.
We've decided that. I didn't realize we decided that. I don't think I decided that. Okay. I
thought we did.
Would you say that would you reevaluate that after this movie?
No, it was more of a joke.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and I just think of Val Kilmer's pursed lips. His lips were always they were so sharp in that costume.
Well, they need to release the Schumacher cut because there's a lot more depth apparently in the OG version.
So are you telling me that every version of a Batman movie has a director's cut that's better, and we've always seen the worst version?
Not every. It's just apparently Joel Schumacher. It's a note. There's deleted scenes and a bunch of extra shit. So
Marcos is asking, is that the nipple suit? I believe it is. I believe that's correct. So all that to say that we talked about, Jeremy. We recently reviewed the Batman: The Long Halloween parts 1 and 2 on the show, and you might recall that I talked about the first part of that, part 1, being like a perfect Batman movie, right? I thought everything about it worked. It was really compelling. The mystery was interesting. It looked really good. And then part 2 really let me down, right? And I like that. You would agree that you probably felt the same way, or would you disagree there?
Yeah, I was on the the
Yeah.
first one was so good. We were eagerly anticipating the follow up, which was only a few months later, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of was lackluster. Did you end up getting a comic at any of your viewings of the movie?
No, I didn't. Did you get one?
Yeah, so I got the Batman: The Long Halloween #1 special edition with um, the cover that is drawn in the art style of the movie,
Like the red and
essentially
black?
with all the. No, it's
Yeah.
not red and black. It just has a bunch of. It has Catwoman, Batman, Riddler,
Oh, okay.
Penguin, just kind of on it in an artistic way, I guess.
Okay. Is it like that purple and black, like the Long Halloween, or is it
Yeah,
more
it's like
like
purple
yeah?
stuff.
Okay.
It's like white around the edges.
I
It's
think
cool.
Marcos. I think Marcos, you went to that early screening. I think they gave you something different to that. There was some other comic book, but you can let us know in the chat there. And by the way, anyone who is listening live, feel free to jump in on the chat. We love having people here. We do this live semi regularly. We don't have a set schedule. I wish we did. On YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch, so you can subscribe to us on all those places. Jeremy, you know, describe your favorite type of Batman? From it, like, I want to know, like, what works about the character that you really like, that you feel like maybe hasn't been explored, or that you like when it is explored.
Yeah, well, I think here it's clear from the get go that this is the most comic accurate Batman.
I
So
agree.
everything that we kind of know of the character and would expect, for the most part, like happens here. There's
Mm-hmm.
less like strikes than there are balls, I guess, um, in terms of everything that this Batman's trying to be.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I just love that aspect of it that we were finally getting like every detail essentially, but not overly explained and kind of
Right.
just they're able to play with it in the tone they set here, which is also brilliant. It feels very realistic and grounded, even though I feel like it flourishes more in the moments where
Yeah.
it feels more fantastical, where it like it just nails everything. But I feel like there are moments in between where there could be more done or just different choices to really make it like a very bold like 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Because I think there's an argument here that's for sure like a 10 out of 10, but I have around the 9 out of 10.
Ooh,
But
interesting.
overall, yeah, just really happy with it and still thinking about it.
Okay. So I'll answer my own question there a little bit too, which is my favorite type of Batman is the detective Batman. I have two kind of favorites. I have Bat God, which is kind of the Grant Morrison Batman that I really like, who kind of is like supernaturally good at everything and like can appear and disappear as needed, right? As the story requires, you know. I think that Batman's fun, but doesn't translate to the screen very well, just like most things Grant Morrison does. But then there's the detective Batman, which, obviously this movie is heavily based on Year One and The Long Halloween, which has a lot of that stuff in it. And talking about Long Halloween, the animated adaptation, same thing. And I just love this idea of exploring mysteries in this world of Gotham and having these characters that we know, like Penguin, pop up, like Catwoman and Riddler in
Hmm.
this case, being in and a part of the world. Now, the one thing that this movie has that kind of the Long Halloween and those other comic book adaptations have is the ability to have more villains kind of come in and out of the story, right? And a movie like this, even at 3 hours, can't really do that. So I can understand that kind of challenge. But for me, and just giving my overall impressions here, this is a 10 out of 10 movie for me because it nails that detective Batman so well. It creates a compelling mystery. I feel like I was describing this movie, when we were talking about what could this movie be. I feel like I described what it actually ended up being, and I'm not saying they obviously gave us a lot to base that off of, but what I'm saying is like I really wanted something that was a little bit slower, spent more time with Batman in the costume and didn't spend like I think about The Dark Knight Rises. We didn't see Batman for like an hour into that movie. It's baffling to me that you're going to do that.
It's mind blowing how much Batman is here. Actually,
It's
like there's
so
almost
good.
not very much. But yeah, it's awesome. It's like I want you know any more seconds I can get. Like
Mm-hmm.
of just like they linger on the cowl, on his face, on his
Yes.
expressions, on his eyes, on this like these like in the intro when like he's filing the suit and he's surveying the the crime scene.
Yes.
It's spectacular.
I know. Oh,
His movements, the he's not really speaking. He's just staring at
I
you're staring
love.
at him.
You're right, Jeremy. The
You're like,
lack, the choice to not say stuff at certain times, or
yeah,
just the look is just
right.
enough. Perfect Batman. That's pitch
And in
perfect stuff.
and in this moment, it's like you're wrestling with, kind of, Robert Pattinson's like you're not
Mm-hmm.
like you don't know exactly what's going on with him just yet. Like we've heard his voice,
Yep.
and stuff with that kind of year one,
Narration.
Watchmen Rorschach kind of narration.
So
It's so
cool.
slick. I could watch that on loop.
Jeremy,
Um,
I talk about watching movies, back to back or like rewatching film. Often I have a hard time getting back into a movie even once I've seen it once already because
right.
I kind of know what's happening. The second it cuts to the opening shot, which is just title screen, right?
Yeah.
It's like we're gonna do title card. We're not gonna cut away from this again, and then it's Ave Maria, which turns out to be Riddler's like theme music for the whole movie.
Mhm.
What a beautiful song! I just got to say, I listened to it in the car on the ride home. I've
Yeah.
been listening to it on like repeat over and over and over again.
Yeah, the
Obviously,
mix that's tied in with the actual theme is
oh,
astounding.
it's unbelievable. But what I'm saying is like they just pull you right in because that initial once you get past that kind of that Ave Maria bit, you get to this conversation between Batman and the audience, this narration, and
Mhm.
the visual flares that they're doing here, like the look of the city is obviously they show us a lot of Gotham.
Yeah.
I think this is the best looking Gotham we've ever had. It's the perfect mix between these gothic elements, which are obviously crucial to
Mhm.
Gotham. It's right in the name, and then this like neo noir neon stuff that they've got going with this kind of like I love the version of the of Times Square that they have built up here
Yeah.
with this like old statue in the middle. It's so cool looking.
But then you get
It's
like
so
we get a
grimy.
lot of golden hour too
Oh
throughout the
yes,
the movie.
I
Um,
and so Gotham just works as a place. So like it feels real. There's a lot been talk on Twitter around like some of the previous incarnations of Gotham we have. Of course, we had like the matte painted versions of the 80s, 90s Batman stuff that was like very stylized, right? Like skyscrapers that are like essentially leaning over people, that kind of stuff. Then you have Nolan's version of Gotham, which is essentially just Chicago, New York, and Pittsburgh mashed together as needed, you know. And that all works, and it works for Nolan stuff. And there's been a lot of like, you don't have to tear something down to bring something up. I don't want to tear down Nolan stuff. I've had a lot of criticisms of Nolan stuff over the years, especially as it's aged on me. A lot of it around like the choreography of the fights, which are lame, um, and some of the like obviously his voice has kind of not aged well. I think Pattinson's Bat voice is going to age quite well, even though it's not that different. You know what I mean? Like it's similar to what was happening with Bale,
yeah,
but like
he's spoken about it in interviews and how
yeah,
he's like, how could you not do what Bale's doing essentially? So it's his version of that, mixed with other influences. I think he was influenced by Willem Dafoe's lighthouse character.
I
He said
I
in an interview, which is interesting.
yeah, I got to admit that Robert Pattinson's like there's a lot of stuff floating around about what Robert Pattinson's been saying in interviews, and it is hilarious stuff.
Yeah,
Like
he seems like the like genuinely like fun, nice,
yeah,
like good-hearted person. Like he's always giggling and laughing at the
have
things he's
you
saying.
have you
It's
heard the one
nuts.
about when he talks about Shadow the Hedgehog?
Maybe.
This is the funniest shit. So I don't know for the people out there who may not know. So there's a version of Sonic the Hedgehog that in the 90s they invented Shadow the Hedgehog, who's black and red, edgy, right? So so there's an interview where Robert Pattinson talks about how he used Shadow the Hedgehog's character as like an influence on his version of Batman, and it is very funny. And he talks about how he's brooding and dark, and like that's what Batman's about, and all that kind of stuff. It's and he talks about video games a lot in his interviews. He does seem like a
Yeah.
genuinely fun,
He knows all
easygoing
about the
guy.
Court of Owls. Actually,
Yes,
even the Riddler, Paul Dano was talking about Court of Owls and how that's a really good one. They keep saying, and I'd imagine they there is some hints of that in this movie too.
yes, there
So
is. What I love about that is that I think there's two things I love about that. There's one that it's amazing how quickly the Court of Owls have become like ingrained in the Batman mythos. You know,
yeah, we talked about that before. How it's just like at this point a staple,
yeah,
in his journey at some point.
and it just stands perfectly alongside the Riddlers, the Jokers, and the every other the Penguins, and all those characters, and the Court of Owls feels like it fits it right in. I could totally see the Batman 2 being about the Court of Owls. I think that's totally plausible. It totally fits into
Also,
this world.
Hush was a major
Yes.
Easter egg kind of thrown in there.
Yes. I feel like I don't think you can do Hush in the second movie. I think the reason for that is because you need more characters, and there has to be Bruce Wayne as a character has to be built up more. I don't want to get into this like part 2 too much stuff there, but there
Yeah.
definitely was an obvious Hush reference in the middle of the movie, which is cool. I also don't feel like they were. It didn't feel like we talk about like references and Easter eggs and that kind of stuff. There's definitely those things in here, but it never feels like the movie is trying to like lean into those things, except for maybe I guess the late cameo at the end of the movie. That feels a
Yeah.
little bit on the nose, but other than that, it all feels like it fits just naturally into the movie without being a distraction.
Like Matt Reeves like meticulously crafted this whole thing, and we are just on his ride essentially,
Right.
and it's so refreshing because it's like it just feels like a real movie, like, but it's
Yes.
this heightened story, one that we all know, but we're exploring like a particular time period that shows these characters kind of at their making point, and
Mm-hmm.
it's cool that the villains are like in that scenario around Batman, like the kind of they wouldn't exist without him type thing,
Yes.
and vice versa, which is super cool. And they borrow from year one, obviously, Long
Yeah.
Halloween, but the Arkham games, there's a lot in here, and the Snyder stuff. Year one, or sorry, yeah, year one. Or wait, there's 2 years. There's a comic book.
He's in year
Zero,
2.
yeah,
There's Earth 1 and there's
zero,
year
year
1.
two,
Earth 1 I
and
think they borrow heavily from here.
yeah, for like Alfred's kind of
Yes.
look
Yeah.
and whatnot.
By the way, do you
Um,
like Alfred? Did you like the version of Alfred here? I thought Andy Serkis's Alfred was really cool. He's not in the movie that much, but like what we do get feels like it fits. He's like obviously former bodyguard instead of butler, which I like as the kind of a switch up there. But
right.
he like
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think you're right that he's not really in it that much. I think it's clear that his purpose is right in the middle there when Bruce is having doubt
Yes,
from meeting our second kind of villain of the movie in Falcone.
that
Um,
Jeremy, that scene with when he's apologizing or he's accusing him of lying to him. This is
yeah,
the first bit, and then he's like you don't even understand. He is a good man. All this stuff. I thought that scene crushed me. I thought it was so good. This movie does such a perfect job of showing you how hurt Bruce Wayne is as a person, by the death of his parents. We don't need to see his parents die again. We've seen it a million times. Obviously, that's something that was talked about like so much, maybe too much before this movie came out. Oh, we're not going to see the parents die again.
yeah,
Okay,
and
whatever.
we revisit the idea of his parents through this conversation with
Yes.
Alfred, essentially,
Yeah,
and you
and their
see the
main plot
pain
point.
in his expressions, in his whole being there, as to like he's put so much time and effort and his soul and everything into this,
Mm-hmm.
this creation of the Batman to right wrongs and seek justice, but it's based off like this false kind of identity
Or
in
what
his
he or
parents.
what I guess. So that's the thing with it. I love that they keep it ambiguous, right?
Right,
It's
because it's nice to get the not as a beat for beat origin
Mm-hmm.
and the murder of Bruce Wayne's parents has always been like two sides where it could just be Joe Chill, who's not
Right.
connected to anything, just it just happened, or there's something more behind the scenes, whether it
Right.
involves mob bosses or whatnot.
Yeah, and I think the duet, like the fact that it could be either, works for
Yeah,
this
yeah.
movie really great. Like he's it creates stakes with Falcone, right? But it
And
also,
Hearing Alfred's second, and he's unsure, but like
yeah,
know, he says like if you don't think I've spent every waking second trying to figure it out, like you trust him way more than Falcone.
right,
We're realizing with Bruce that he tried to sell his perspective that makes him look like the good guy, but
Falcone did,
Alfred kind of basically
right.
says that's not the case.
Yeah, and I what I like is that Bruce is, he's so vulnerable. Like what's his weak spot? It's his parents, right? So he's willing to believe that that's what Falcone says at first, because he doesn't know what happened. He was just a kid and he doesn't have the context understanding, and he still really is emotionally stunted in this movie, which I think totally works. He doesn't trust anybody really, but he has this moment with Alfred that's like truly genuine, touching. They hold hands. He talks about how like you needed a father. He says like you needed a father, and I couldn't be that person. And I thought like, wow, what a fascinating. Like I know we've explored these ideas. These are all ideas we've explored in the past, and I think that's true for this entire movie. None of this is wholly new. It's either been explored in the comics or an animated series, or in a previous live action movie in some way. But the way that they do it here, it's concise, and it's emotionally impactful. I feel like this movie's 3 hours long. I've heard some reviews about it being a little dragging at times. I didn't feel a single second of this movie was dragging. I thought it totally, its pace, it works perfectly throughout. Um, it's constantly driving to a steady drive to this finale, and it doesn't ever pick up the pace, which you could argue could be a weakness of the movie. Like it could maybe use a little bit of some heightened
Well,
tension
I
at
think
some
there's
points,
some
but
truth in just the way the plot kind of goes. Like the Riddler essentially gets sidelined for a good portion, and then during that portion, it's almost like you're still thinking of that, but like there's a
right.
new avenue to go down, and then like Catwoman has to explain her whole thing, and then Falcone is okay. We know he's the bad guy now. We're figuring out, we're understanding why he's the bad guy. So I think there is a little bit of that there. Like I don't think it's unwarranted. I think the pacing there
Hmm.
is a little off. I think my second viewing I kind of noticed it more. But the first one, I was just so amped up with everything happening. Like just
Absorbing every
the
moment,
music is insane. Like the main theme
Michael
is so
Giacchino.
emotional and
Yeah.
classic, and it has like all these strings and like this dark like
What
bell
I
at one point, which reminds me of like the animated series.
Yes, I
And like
love.
I watched an interview where he talked about how like this music needs to sound as if like Bruce Wayne was like hearing it, and like he was also like thinking of the Batman. Like
Right.
just like a weird like approach at
Like
creating
something
this
that
thing.
can like what a weird, I mean, that music when you're writing stuff is like however you can explain it,
Yeah,
whatever works for you,
it's like
man,
sure.
kind of situation. Like, but like I love that it's driving, and you can use it in like different ways. One thing that I think is interesting about a good theme is that can be used in to tell different emotions, right, or express different emotions, right. So you can have the like really angry driving version of the theme, which you get during the car chase sequence, right, which is so cool. It's like it's the orchestra at
Yeah,
its highest.
it might be up there top whatever. I have to go over a list of car
Right.
chases and whatnot, but I mean it's so it's just so slick. It's so good. Like the editing, the camera when it's attached to the body of the
Mm-hmm.
Batmobile,
The reveal of
the
the
just I
Batmobile.
yeah,
Yeah.
well yeah, that is okay. And then I watched an interview where Matt Reeves was explaining that like he wanted the Batmobile to feel like genuinely scary.
Right.
And he had reference like a lot of horror elements
Oh,
are
absolutely.
represented in this movie,
Across
and
the
with the
board.
Batmobile in particular, it's from the car horror movie Christine, which
Right.
is like a killer car or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, just when that scene was playing out, my jaw was dropped. I was blown away by how this was essentially the legendary, mythic meeting of the Penguin and the Batman.
So
Like
cool.
this is the first time where he catches him, and it's like this crazy dramatic fashion, and you get these iconic shots of the Riddler once his car flips. We're inside the vehicle, and we feel him
Oh, that's
slowly rest upside
so
down.
cool.
Then we see the Batman with that
Upside
color and the
down.
flames
Yeah.
upside down, and then this super weird to like sideways bat head from the
Yeah.
Penguin's
Yes.
perspective,
And it's
and
dripping
it's
up.
like,
It's dripping
yeah,
up, which I think is so cool.
and it's
Yeah.
like this is just a quintessential, okay, Batman like caught you, now he's gonna bring you in, like
Yep.
just an iconic meeting with these characters,
I
and the
they
Batmobile was just so well represented.
they make everything look so slick in this movie without it looking like cheap. It
Yeah,
all feels really
cinema. I just
gritty.
kept saying cinema the whole time, which
Yeah.
is
I mean,
like
I
a
like.
recurring joke,
I don't think we.
on film Twitter.
I don't think we give Matt Reeves. I loved most of, if not all of those.
I do. He is a living legend after this movie.
Well, I
Um,
agree with you. I feel like I've been talking about, great directors. Who are the great modern directors right now? Right. Denis Villeneuve obviously comes to mind. Right. Um, but like, I don't think we give Matt Reeves enough credit. This is like masterful craftsmanship. Every
yeah.
detail has been thought about. Like they had a lot of time. Obviously, the delay of because of COVID, this movie was delayed. I
Yeah,
think
which
there's
upped the budget, I think, by 100 million, which is like pretty crazy.
yeah, I think it's pretty clear that a lot of the reshoots happened on a soundstage using that kind of Star Wars.
And Patton said that COVID too, I think, as
Yeah,
well,
and so they've
which
used this
delayed
kind
it.
of this new technology. A lot of all those shots, for instance, on like the skyscraper where the bat signal is, that's all on a
Yeah,
soundstage.
it's all
But with
2D
that big,
screens.
with the venue, right, with these, or
Yeah.
the volume, sorry, with these big LCDs, which I
Oh, I just
think
can't wait to see more of this.
is the future. It's the future of filmmaking in a lot of ways. In some ways, it makes the movie feel a little claustrophobic at times. But I think for a Batman movie, I think that totally is fine. Like
Well,
you
it
almost
just
want
blurs
that
the
feeling.
line. It just blurs the line so just seamlessly. Like you can't really tell unless you're looking for it.
Well, the
You know
light.
what I
I
mean?
mean, I knew it was there, so I was looking at it. But like
Yeah, that's what I
because
mean.
they have like puddles of water everywhere. This movie's it's constantly raining. Um, which which I think is pretty funny.
Even
Like
in
it's
the
just
rain.
always fucking
Well, he says
raining.
in the opening monologue, right?
Yeah. And so, but like in that, but
October
I'm talking about in these
31st.
shots where they're in this volume, essentially, the reflections off the puddles look so real because they are like they're just reflecting off the screen, and you get these amazing reflections that look and off the eyeballs and off. It just makes things feel
And
real.
there's
And
not much use of heavy CG. Maybe in the car chase scene when he kind of goes up the ramp and the
yeah,
semis are blowing up and they're all crashing. But I saw another interview with Matt Reeves basically saying how he feels like those moments can take you out of a movie because
right.
that it's an effects shot essentially.
Yes.
So I like that there's not much of that because then it really has that tonal effect from like a Seven or is even the Zodiac movie, like just very
Yes.
grounded. But it's these fantastical characters, and like there are moments where like when Batman like explode like with the guy when he explodes, it's like he
Mm.
just takes a bomb to the face. It's like
Yeah.
there are little tweaks
Yes.
he just bring up his cape and that would shield him, and we as
That's all you
Batman
need.
fans would be like it's all
Yes.
good.
That's
And
all
then
you
even
need.
when he glides around the city, it's like he needs this whole other
Contraption.
gadget
Yeah.
thing, and then it's like but it messes up at the end and he limps away, and
I
like there's no like where's the batter, like if you threw a couple batarangs here and there, I thought that would have been really sick, like in the
Yes,
nightclub
that's
maybe.
coming. I
I
think that's
love the
coming,
nightclub
Jeremy.
scene. Oh, for sure.
I mean, so here's the thing. So back up. Two things I want to say. Correct from before. I didn't mention. I said, well, I brought up Seven when I was talking about the pre-show. They played the trailer for Seven in the pre-show to the Batman. So I thought that
Oh,
was
that's cool.
a cool trick that they did at the Alamo. And then the other thing was the trailers. The trailers gave away so much of this movie, and I really wish they had held it back. Like that car chase scene where Batman's
Oh
car,
yeah,
the
yeah.
Batmobile comes through. Like,
Coming through the
I wish I
flames, yeah.
hadn't known about that. Like, I think
Yeah,
that would have been
honestly, the
so much
first
cool.
is that in the first trailer?
It's in the
Because I don't.
second
No, it's
trailer.
not. Because the
It's in the
first
second trailer.
trailer was he put it together, and they only shot like a third of the movie or
It was
something like
just
that.
essentially that first crime scene. You know,
Yeah,
that's that
we saw the
and
boots walking up and like a
yeah,
little bit of the cowl.
but
Oh, and
not
then
much
I want to
else.
talk about the beginning too. The
Yes.
beginning of this movie again, just so it
Yes.
is just unbelievable,
Yes.
really. But when he is explaining the vengeance and the shadows,
Yes.
and we get people of Gotham, we get Driphead thing, which is a call
Yes.
forward, I guess, to the drug, whatever. And just how everyone they're doing something in Gotham, this huge city that we're getting
Yes.
pieces of and visuals of,
I can't be
and then
everywhere,
they
he
just
says.
pan to the shadow and like it just
Yes.
lingers, and we're just like
Yes.
the Batman, like it's gonna come through. We're
Well,
gonna
it's
see his
better than that.
eyes.
They start with they show you he's like, we have a signal now, and then it's like
Oh yeah,
it
yeah.
cuts to these people, and
It's
then
a
there's like
warning.
there's a helicopter, and they're being like
Mm,
spotlit, and then they look
so
up at the
good.
helicopter, and then they see past the helicopter, and then they see the bat signal, and then
Yeah.
they freak out.
So
It's
that
so cool.
is when I said uh, is Matt Reeves just knocking it out of the park. Just a perfect intro, and I love the paint can rolling
Oh
into the shadows,
yes, I
and then
bet
someone runs by really quick, but it's almost like a capey like silhouette. So it's like
yes
it gives you like that horror kind of scare jump almost that it could
they
be Batman like swooping out of nowhere.
you mentioned horror elements. They use that strings, like the sound from
Oh
a horror
gosh,
movie, with
yes,
the sound. I don't know how to do it without sounding dumb, but
crazy.
they use that sound
Yeah.
so often. I think it's so effective to channel
Hmm.
traditional horror tropes into a Batman movie, and including that beginning setup where it's like Batman becomes this creature of the night, essentially, which is always
Hmm.
talked about. They always talk about
You
it. It's like,
can't
oh
be
yeah,
everywhere at once,
right.
and
But this is
yeah,
the first time they ever show you, right? Show don't tell, right? They've always tell us about
yes,
it, but this they actually show us. This is what the criminals react. And by the way, the
yeah,
visual style of Gotham in this opening shot is so cool. And the villains or these kind of
right,
criminals, the hoods they call them, are so cool because um, they look like they're right out of the Arkham games. They look like thugs right out of the Arkham games,
yeah,
and
just
especially
the gang or whatever.
the dude with the mask who robs that convenience store. I thought that was
Yeah,
like the coolest looking thug scene I've ever. And he gets hit by that car, and he like runs
yeah, like
away.
the fear, like
Yeah.
it showed what the power, the tool of fear is
Mm-hmm.
in those moments with the stringy music,
Yep.
raining, it's dark, you have no idea where this guy is, but
Yes.
you see the signal in the sky, and then when we finally get the reveal, it's like we're looking down this long dark hallway,
Yep.
and we just hear his boots, and it's like it's just a wild shot at just showing this iteration of Batman for the first time,
The
and
first
then he
time we see
proceeds to just
Robert
kick
Pattinson
their
in the
ass.
movie, the first time we see
Right.
Robert Pattinson in the movie is Batman, and I think that's really powerful. I think that is not the case in almost any of these other Batman movies. It's typically we see Bruce Wayne first, and I think that's a shame. And I, this movie, in fact, so much so that it cuts away from moments where you think you'd be in scenes with Bruce Wayne. They're like, no, we're not even going to show you that. We're just going to cut to the next moment where he's
Yeah, and
Batman.
I was just gushing when there was a cut and it was like a door opening from where we're inside and we see two flashlights and it's Gordon and Batman.
Yes.
I couldn't believe that it was happening, that they were finally together,
Yes.
walking, just and their relationship is
Perfect.
just
It's pitch perfect in my opinion.
pitch perfect. The trust that they have, I love. Like we've never really thought about like the GCPD and the other police officers
Right.
and what they would really think if
Yes.
this
There's this one that
quote
what.
unquote freak show would show
Yes.
up, and
This
like
is a
we
police
don't know who
action.
this guy is.
Yeah.
He's a
Exactly.
vigilante. Like why do? But then
Right.
they hear the stories. They're like, oh, Gordon trusts him, kind of, and it's like they just let him on the crime scene, but like they're making fun of him. And
Yes.
like that walk when he's like walking away from us, and after he's called a freak, it looks
Yep.
like it's from the Arkham games or something. Like you get this towering Batman dragging his
He
cape along.
they do a really good job of making Robert. I don't know how tall Robert
But
Pattinson is
bigger.
in real life, but they
Yeah,
make
that's what I
him.
was trying to allude to earlier, was that you're
Yeah,
kind of battling with with what you know of his physicality, and does it really represent like what the Batman from the Arkham games would look like? It's like,
but
no,
I
it's a
mean, the
bit
Batman from the
different.
Arkham games is almost too big.
It's
Like
more
he's
of a,
this like
it's like the Ben Affleck
yeah,
archetype of that
right.
size.
And this feels more grounded in the sense that like he looks like a real person. Marcos, by the way, mentioned earlier, and I wanted to wait till we brought it up, but he mentioned how he loved Jeffrey Wright's performance as Gordon. I
Oh,
loved it as well.
I
Marcos
love the
mentions
shot where we're
here,
following his back and we're walking to the crime scene. It's super slow.
yes,
I don't know if you remember that one. I don't know why. I just adore those little shots
they're
that
really
Reeves
like
throws in throughout.
they're not shy at just lingering and spending time on looking at Batman
Hmm.
in costume, and I feel like that is such a we always in the I don't know in these last movies that were where we have Batman, it's like so few and far between. We have to like freeze frame. Oh look how cool Batman looks here, right? This movie is like no. We're gonna spend like a full 30 seconds just looking at Batman looking at a piece of paper, you know.
Hmm.
And you could argue that that's boring. I disagree. I think everything. I just
I
disagree.
disagree. I think looking at a piece of paper is not boring.
Well, like no, because they're solving problems. Like they're solving crimes. He's being a detective, right?
Yeah.
You're looking there. You have the They're like, okay, we're gonna show his eyes. We're gonna do the painted black thing. I'm fine with that because the visual storytelling you can do with Pattinson's eyes. His eyes carry so much weight in this movie. I think
Yeah.
they're
They really
full of
show up
so much.
white within the look of it too, to really
Yeah.
give it like that classic comic book look.
hmm
Um,
Um, I
yeah.
and Marcos also says here he's like I died when Gordon said he pulled his like, to pull his punch. And he says he did. I thought that was so funny. He's like
Yeah.
I did pull my punch.
Yeah, there's a good amount of like
Humor
humor in here that doesn't feel like a person was paid
make
to
to
write,
punch
like
it up.
that's good at, yeah, to write it essentially.
hmm Everything that's funny in this
It's
movie
just
is
Matt
funny
Reeves
because
being intelligent within his
yes, it's
script
because it fits in
to
the
add
world.
humor.
It feels natural.
Yeah.
Like it's a funny thing.
The penguin wobble when they forget him or whatever,
Yes.
right? That's
I
funny.
also that whole scene is funny to me because like he's like look at my partner and he's like come on what are you doing what are you showing me and
Oh
it's
yeah,
like
he's like, and then he's like, "Wake up!" Or Gordon yells, "Wake up!" or something. Or
yeah.
he's like, "Open your eyes!"
Everything about the I think okay we're talking about performances. I mean we might as well talk about Colin Farrell.
Wow, dude, Taryn didn't even know Colin Farrell was in the movie. She
I
was like, "Huh?" She's like that because I was watching like a panel on
yeah
YouTube of all the actors, like an interview, and
yeah.
she's like, "What is Colin Farrell doing there?"
I was watching it with my girlfriend also, and I was like, the second he appears on screen, I was like, "That's Colin Farrell." She's like, "What?"
Okay.
She's like, "What are you?" It's like, "What?
And
No."
what an iconic intro to his character and his meeting with the
Yes,
Batman.
yes.
This
He just,
amazing nightclub scene where Batman just
oh,
walks in there,
Jeremy.
which is we've seen that in the Dark Knight. We've seen that in the Dark Knight. I think there's a club scene in
Yes,
there where
there is this the
Christian
scene in the
Bale
Dark
kicks
Knight, which
ass.
I always think about, where he's like, she's like, "I can't hear myself think," or like, "I can't even hear myself talk,"
Yeah.
and she's like, "What makes you think I want to hear you talk?"
Yeah.
Which I think is obviously a great scene. Like anytime the Batman is in a nightclub or like where there's like flashing lights and like
Mhm.
any strobe lighting of any
And
kind,
all the
it
physicality
always
and
works.
motion here is very good. Like there's not like,
hmm
ooh, that looks iffy. That was like a stunt double or something.
I
It looks like he's holding his own. It's
I
pretty
know
cool.
they use stunt doubles constantly, but I
Mhm.
can't tell when it's
Couldn't tell
happening.
here.
And I love that they're also not afraid. Like this is what I was talking about before when I was talking about The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises and Batman Begins, which are great Batman movies. Like The Batman Begins, especially, is underrated, I think, in comparison to Dark Knight, just generally speaking, which is obviously elevated by the Joker's performance and all that kind of stuff. But the biggest issue with those movies, and you could argue, I don't know, Nolan wasn't interested in that stuff necessarily as much. He was really more interested in exploring the character from like a psychological standpoint. But the combat was so fucking lame. Like I challenge you to go back to those movies and watch the fight sequences, and it's like you will be blown away by how like stiff and
Yeah, but I think
uninteresting they are.
I think you're right, but I think let's say in the time as it was playing
hmm
out,
Mm-hmm.
it felt like Batman was a bit more technical than we've ever seen him approach
Sure.
fights. We also have it mixed in with Bruce Wayne when he dismantles that shotgun at one point.
Yeah.
Um, it was like those movies in particular. It was a lot of Christian Bale doing a really good playboy millionaire Bruce Wayne,
Yes.
but then flipping the switch to where he's Batman and like he goes down that escape or into that escape room and ignores those people,
Yes.
which is a
Yep.
super funny moment. So
Yes. Yes, it is.
I
That's
just
a good
also want to,
moment
I don't
too.
want to be a part of like the hate train that is happening for the Nolan movies. I
No,
think I
I
think
agree
I
too.
think no
That's what I'm
matter what,
saying.
I think no matter what, it's it's going to invite comparisons in every iteration. I think that's completely fair.
Yes.
I don't have too many glaring like things that I like would like to I'm first at
Right.
saying and pointing this out,
I think
which
that
I see that's happening out there.
yeah, that is happening a lot. And like I said before, we don't have to tear down the Nolan movies to raise this one up. It invites the most direct comparisons because they're both trying to be grounded versions of the character, I think.
And I think
Right?
The Dark Knight obviously more
More
so, but
so.
I
Yeah.
think with Nolan and just everything that it brings, I feel like those movies, it had a really big kind of
They
epic
felt
like
like
grand
blockbuster.
sense.
Yes.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And I feel like for me, this movie, even though I just love it so much, there's a missing feeling a little bit of
I
it,
don't see nothing
and
about that is
that's
true for
why
me.
I don't I can see the love shown towards the Nolan movies through the
Right.
the hate that I can still feel that kind of
Well,
that feeling.
yeah, and I think that's totally fair. What's interesting is that I think some people would say that this movie's trying to be more grounded than the Nolan movies are, and I think that's an interesting like debate you can have, like who's trying to be more grounded or whatever. I think
Well, what do you
this
think is the case? Because I think it's the opposite, but there's the technique of how it's filmed and how it's shown
it's
gives it that sense of ground.
it's really
Uh,
hard to describe, but I think what makes the Nolan movies feel more quote unquote grounded is that like the actual physical location of Gotham feels like a real place in the real
and
world,
they're
right?
explaining everything.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Like everything
They're
is explained.
constantly
Like
here's how your bat suit works. Here's what your
yeah,
Batmobile is. Here's how, like that's true.
like
And
really honing in on like the like if you had this much money and you lived
right.
in Chicago or whatever, like this is what it kind of looks like.
Yeah, and so I think that it makes it feel more grounded in the real world. What I like about this version of the character is that it feels grounded in the comic book world, in
Yes,
the sense that like
correct.
you
It
have
looks real.
a Gotham that feels like a unique place that is not in our real world, right? And and a character
Well,
that fits into that
yeah.
place in a natural way that doesn't that wouldn't necessarily work in a like if you had a place like Gotham in the real world, a character like Batman or a person like Batman would fit into that place in the real world. But it because we don't have that, it always feels like a stretch. Whereas here, it's like okay, you've created a Gotham that's compelling. I love that the Bank of Gotham is being spray painted. It says broke on the. I think
Mhm.
that's a really great shorthand to explain what the kind of situation
Yeah,
is in the city.
Jeffrey Wright actually explained in an interview where like he was giving a lot of credit to Reeves and the whole team
Mm-hmm.
like on modernizing Gotham, and in a way a lot of what they show here is representative of like America or certain
Yeah.
parts of it today. So there is a little bit of that connective tissue where feels like it could be a real place that it would exist or
Mm-hmm.
could slowly decay into the worst possible scenario.
Yeah.
So I think they achieved like that's how I view it.
Right. But so back to your original question, like it feels grounded in that sense. But what I love about this Batman is that nothing here feels supernatural but at the same time there's these larger than life elements when he survives the blast to the face, right? Like
Hmm.
no one would survive that. But
Yeah.
if you're standing right in front of a person with a bomb attached to their face, you're
Hmm.
gonna die. So like, and it's so much so that he wakes up and he doesn't even have a scratch on his face, like that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff, it feels larger. That feels comic booky, right?
Hmm.
But it always feels like comic booky in a Batman comic that doesn't have any of the other Justice League members in it, right? It's just Detective Comics. It's Batman doing his shit, and there's going to be elements that don't feel quote unquote real, but they feel real to this world, and that's what I love about this movie. First time ever felt that way. It feels so, Jeremy. It feels so. I get tingles thinking about it because it's the first time I've ever felt like, oh wow, someone finally fucking gets it. They're not
Hmm.
trying to do their a version they're doing they're just doing Batman, you know, so I find that really
Yeah,
refreshing.
with a lot of like uh,
Love,
influences
yeah,
that make sense
yeah,
in
they're
terms of all
pulling
the
from,
storylines he's pulling from,
yeah,
and then the aesthetic of movies like Seven and Zodiac. And we haven't really even talked about the Riddler, but holy cow, like just
yeah,
the mystery and the intrigue surrounding him as it's building, it's so good. And like just his just the way he does his dialogue and like
mm-hmm.
it's so fascinating and eerie. And like there's even a pretty funny moment when he's like doing the live webcam
Yes, he's like, thanks
thing.
guys, thanks for coming out.
Like that was funny, but then even when he just like said like hello like super obnoxiously and like
Right.
just like a selfie video, I just like it's supposed to be like this really sick like dark moment, but like I
I
don't know
think they
why I
know
just
that's
laughed
no. I think they know that's
at it.
funny. I think they're in on that joke, which I think is what makes it so
Yeah,
good. Is that he's
because it's a
he's
call to something in our life, I
he's
guess.
terrifying in the sense that he feels like a real psychopath. You know, like this is a
Yeah.
person that you could see really like influencing people in a real way. By the way, I like that they definitely touch on that at the end of the movie where it's like, no, he's not just acting on his own. He's influenced a whole group of people to act on his behalf, and they're all dressing up like him. I think that's really cool. Um,
Yeah, that
but
was a cool. That was like basically like the climax of like
yeah,
your final fight or
I would say
whatever.
that final fight isn't that much cooler than any of the other fights that happen in the movie,
Yes,
generally speaking.
I think that's why maybe some people feel that dragginess a little
I
bit.
suppose.
And
I
that's
can
also part of the
understand.
reason why my like feeling of like the that specialness, like it's definitely very special, but like the that Dark Knight level of epicness, it doesn't like hit at the ending for me, especially with the Joker kind of thing.
Yeah,
It's
I
it's a little unfortunate, but it's not really, because this movie is it's gonna get sequel. Like I can't wait. Like
yes,
that's like easily my most anticipated
absolutely.
thing
It's not even
again ever.
close. Yeah,
Yeah.
like what are they going to do now? I had posted, there was a tweet that was from one of the people from the Blank Check podcast. So there was like a whole thread under that, and I had just I was just going through commenting on Batman stuff as kind of people were
Mm.
posting it, and this is kind of what I was talking about. The fun of the Twitter side of stuff is that it's mostly positive, and people being like, "Oh, isn't this cool? What would this be like?" or that kind of stuff. And I was like, I would love to see a grounded version of Mister Freeze in this world, and like um, a that that real Batman the animated series version of the character that's very that has like an emotionally grounded story to tell about Nora and all that kind of Nora and all that kind of stuff. I would love to see them slowly ramp into more fantastical villains. Now I think part of that thread was that it's because of the grounded nature of this movie, it's self-limiting in the types of villains it can use. It's like, is it really going to touch on? Is it really going to do Poison Ivy? Is it really going to do Mister Freeze? Is it really going to do anything in that kind of vein? I think it could if you do it right. This is the you
Yeah,
mentioned
and that's
before,
the
Jeremy.
thing.
These are
It's
the
like
creation of these characters, right?
yeah, and Matt Reeves like took just heavy inspiration for these 80-year-old characters essentially,
Mm-hmm.
and we all dug his take, right? Like with
Yep.
the Kurt Cobain like type of Bruce Wayne
Yep.
Batman, like dealing with that whole stuff, and the Zodiac with the Riddler. Um, like there at one point they were going to do a spin-off show about the Gotham
Gotham
PD,
PD. It's
and Matt Reeves
evolved. Yeah.
recently revealed in an interview that that's kind of put on hold, and it's essentially transitioned to like an Arkham horror-esque type series.
Jeremy,
So I
I
feel like
love that idea. I
yeah, so
love
I
it.
feel like because everyone's like pitching their villains and who they want to see, and like everyone's saying
Right.
Mr. Freeze obviously because of we haven't really seen that
Not since
be
Schwarzenegger. Yeah.
but we've seen it, well done in the Arkham games, and then even
Mm-hmm.
with Snyder and Capullo in their run, like
Yes.
Mister Freeze was a cool part of that. But I think with this Arkham series, we can kind of just see who's there and like, just visit,
Well,
even wait. So Tweedledee and Tweedledum are in this movie, right? Is that
the
is that
twins,
correct?
the
The
twins.
twins, isn't that like a
I don't.
representation of like what
Is
they
that
would
who that
be?
are? I don't know. So I
Well, they were
don't.
just so dumb, right? They
And
were
they're
just
wearing
like
those. They have a striped. I think they wear a striped shirt, right?
they have that dumb
Um,
smile. I
and
think so. For me, I feel like that's definitely
sure,
what
I
it
think
is.
that's. I think there's a lot of really cool, like, just little subtle things. They establish the twins. they've kind of cleared the board of the Maronis and the Falcones. So it's like that's kind of the organized crime side of things is kind of over, which I appreciate. Now we can kind of get into the supervillain part of Batman's career, which I
Yeah, and
also
they allude to
appreciate.
that at the beginning with Catwoman and all that stuff. At
Right.
the end, just kind of how like the state of Gotham, what's it going to be like now?
Well, and you
Open
know,
season,
they
basically.
made I commented in that same thread I was talking about before about how there's a very compelling storyline that you can tell about escalation of a weapons an arms race type of scenario, whereas Batman's presence creates bigger criminals, right? And that
Yeah.
they touch on that in this movie, but they also touch on that in the Dark Knight with the Joker. He is created by Batman. That's a story element there, but I don't think that precludes you from reusing that story element here. So now that Riddler's off the table, who's the next supervillain that the Batman helps quote unquote create? Because what's always interesting about both Spider-Man's villains and Batman's villains is a lot of the
Yeah.
times what the villains are created out of mistakes that Batman or Bruce Wayne has made. Right.
Hmm.
I love that. A lot of the times with Mr. Freeze, it's the Waynes are cutting your funding. That's part of that's a kind of an interesting kind of side effect, right? Or like those types of kind of things become they escalate, right? And then
Yeah.
that's how you get into this
Well,
world. So you can
either
tell that
way,
story.
Reeves, went all out with this movie. Like it can stand on its own, right?
Yep.
It doesn't. It could exist as like this, and we'd all look back fondly of it and all that stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
it's getting more. But clearly, I don't think he's going to want to overreach himself. I think he's going to focus on a trilogy of
Yep.
movies with these actors. They're all going to sign on. Penguin, you see more of him. Catwoman, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And
Gordon.
he'll work something. Yeah, Gordon. He'll work something out with HBO Max and Warner Brothers in
Yeah.
terms of the either the GCPD show or the Arkham whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm just very curious for him and his whole meaning and like Bruce Wayne Batman's journey. How is he represented in the second movie? What villain makes the
Right.
most sense to expose that or whatever? And then the third one, right? Which I think the third one should be the Court of Owls. I feel like
I
if
feel
they
like you could.
can
Ooh, that's interesting. I think you could do the Court of Owls second.
second, yeah,
Yeah, and the reason for that is because I think this movie establishes this concept of the Waynes and the Arkhams as being these founding fathers of the
right,
city.
which
It
is from
starts
Earth
setting those
One,
things right,
essentially.
and then of course the Court of Owls
Judgment.
also has the penny, or not the Pennyworths, the Cobblepots as another kind of third element of that.
And then the Dick
And,
Grayson lineage
right, so you kind of create.
in
And I don't know if
this.
they'll introduce Robin into this. I think it would be cool if you did, but you
Well,
don't
I think
have
they
to.
alluded that like I think well I heard Reeves another podcast or whatever talking about how if he was going to do Robin, like he would really have to showcase how that would work and find some sort of emotional uh,
Right.
thing there to latch on to. And I think we got a little bit of that with Bruce when he kind of oversees the child who we
Yes.
see, gets his dad gets murdered from the beginning.
Yes.
It's very cool seeing him just again not speaking to him, right,
Just looking at him
exuding
every
all
time there's a
these
an alone one small young boy by themselves, he just stares at
yeah,
them. It's funny, but at the same time it's like it's funny in retrospect, but at the time it's like, oh
right,
wow, it actually really hit me emotionally. Like this is a person who's like
exactly. So
connecting with
how
this person.
does
Yeah.
so how does Reeves introduce that and just run with it, like actually investing in
So
the story to get it. So I think the Robin would be more likely in the third one then,
third
if anything.
movie. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it's like. If you're gonna do Robin, you have to. If you're gonna do it in the third, it's like, is it almost too late to introduce Robin? That almost feels again like Batman and Robin, where you're bringing him in at the very end, which just
And they
feels
have the
weird.
they have the one character in the gang, right, who like clearly is like doesn't want to be a
Oh
part of this gang,
yeah.
right,
So
with the
by the
half
way,
face.
he's from Titans, by the way, which is
Yeah,
so
he was
funny.
Tim. I think he was Tim Drake
He's Tim
in the
Drake in
Titans. Yeah.
Titans, and I've been watching that off and on because I'm just like, I want more DC stuff. So
It's
I turn it on every once in a while, and I was like, oh, they killed Hawk, and I was like, that sucks. But I was like, oh, it's because he's Jack Reacher now. I understand.
my goodness. You should listen to him on the Michael Rosenbaum
Oh
podcast.
yeah, is he
Yeah.
good?
Yeah, it's
I
just a fascinating story, and like his perspective is cool.
but anyway, like I was back to what I was saying. I think you could tell the that Court of Owls story second, and the reason for that is because it allows you to further explore Bruce's character in like a background setting and like really dive into the background of Bruce and his family, and that's already been set up here. And it can be told as a solo story, I think, really easily without having to bring in like a lot of other extra characters in. And then for the third movie, you can really blow it up and like, okay, you've cleared out the city of all its corruption, quote unquote, the systemic corruption. And now you have some sort of, you either have a face off with the Joker or you have some sort of like villain
I think
team
the
up
Riddler's
scenario.
going to be back. I think it's going to be
Yeah.
just a huge thing. And I think they have the
Like a
confidence
0
and
year
the
thing.
knowingness to really plant the seeds, especially in the second one, and then just nail it in the third.
But then where do you go
They're
for
gonna have-
like, so we know for sure there's going to be 3, right? I think this is a beloved version of the
it
character
would be
already.
just another crime if we didn't get any more of this, for sure.
Yeah, so there's gonna for sure these 3. I think he's Matt Reeves already said he's not interested in telling us.
Show too.
Yeah, so and I think, by the way, if you're gonna call a show, if it's gonna be built around Arkham, you just call it Arkham Asylum. I would be shocked if it's not called that. You know what I mean? So, we can dive into that in a second. But I think this character, Matt Reeves talks about, he's not interested in telling a story of this Batman in a larger DC world. Okay, fair enough.
No, yeah,
DC might feel differently.
No, he said like, I'm like, it's like a famous quote where he's basically like, I get you want me to do this, but I'm going to do it this way. If you don't like that, like that's also cool.
Right.
Like it wasn't like they really wanted him, right? Like,
yeah.
Because at first he was going to just direct Ben Affleck in whatever script that was. But then and then a bunch of shit happened, obviously, and then he was able to just kind of hone in on what he would bring to the table, growing up with Batman, reading it in the 70s and stuff like that.
Right.
So,
and I think like I said, like DC might want something different or whatever. Warner Brothers came out and said this movie's a success. We believe in filmmakers' visions, which I'm sure is very
Emmerich, the guy at the top of it all, like literally came out and said that. So crazy.
Yeah, which I think obviously is funny. Maybe a little on the nose for those who've been like championing for Snyder's stuff for a while and wanting his vision, but.
Well, it's just and then like those like what you see on that side is like the Discovery mergers happening and like all these articles around the success of the Batman are touting those people's names like they have anything to do with it. Like it's just like literally Matt Reeves and all these great people.
He's just this guy's been on he's just been on the sense I get is that Matt Reeves has been on an island making this movie and knowing it's going to be good and just saying like trust me. And then
for 5 years.
Yeah, and he's like, don't worry, it's going to be good. And it turns out it fucking was really fucking good. Like, I want to see this movie again and again and again and again, and I can't wait to get it on home video because
it might even be a 4-hour cut.
I don't know what that even looked like because there's so like I feel like this movie doesn't really leave anything on the table.
I think it'd be more Catwoman and Falcone, if anything.
Probably. Here's the thing. We haven't talked about Zoe Kravitz and Selena Kyle, and we haven't talked about John Turturro and Carmine Falcone. But let's talk about Selena Kyle for a minute. I love Zoe Kravitz's performance here. It's so understated. It's subtle. I hate saying it without sounding like a weird creep, but there's a lot of sexiness to it, which I think is really key to the character of Catwoman. Obviously, was a major component of it in The Dark Knight Rises as well. I just thought it felt equally as grounded as the Batman character, and they're like, we're not going to describe anything. Yeah, she's just really good at acrobatic stuff. She's just a good like. It's like we don't need to. I'm like, okay, yeah, it's Catwoman, sure.
Well,
right? She's got a bunch of cats.
First kind of suit up and meeting with Batman is incredible. That was another sequence where my jaw was dropped. I couldn't believe that Catwoman and Batman were like dancing essentially. His cape was so cool looking. How he was just like fluttering around. He was throwing it kind of. Yes. And then how he landed up on top of her, and then when he like. When he's covering her mouth and holding her close.
Yeah.
Unbelievable shot.
The chemistry,
like
Jeremy.
Straight out of comics.
I think the chemistry between Zoe Kravitz and Robert Pattinson. We invented a new term. The chemistry is it's so good. Like it's you could cut it with a knife. It's like it's palpable. It's on the screen. And I've seen people out there saying that they had no chemistry at all, and I don't know what movie they watched. But like,
well, it's because their characters are both like they're clearly both like fighting for something and like want something. And it's really cool to see them bounce off each other because they have the one sequence when they're working together, right? Like
Hmm.
clearly she wants something more than he does
Oh, by
when
the
she
way,
kind of
Jeremy, I
diverts.
love that sequence when he's in her ear and she's in the club. I was like, that's right out of a video game, and I think that's the coolest
Yeah.
shit. I like, it's
The contact lens is pretty crazy. That's I think that's out
yes,
of Snyder's book, or
okay,
in
it's
Capullo.
it's it's so cool. Like the gadgets on
It's like the
themselves
creepy
are
version of Batman though, right? Because he's like he has to like obsess
yes,
over
yes.
every single minor
Also, I
detail.
like this idea that like she like looks at that person and he's like no, look again, and she's like wait, couldn't you just pause it and get like I clearly saw that there was a
Yeah,
clear. Couldn't you just rewind?
and then it's Peter Skarsgård who I didn't think we
Yes.
knew was in this movie,
No,
even
I
though
didn't
we
either.
seen him in the trailer.
Yeah, and
He's so good.
he just
How is
he's
he
just
so good at acting?
I don't I don't know, but he's just like playing this like wimpy. He's the DA, right? And what I like is that you set up the possibility for new DA, which obviously opens up the room for a new modern version of Two Face, which I think would also be would fit really
But I
well
mean,
into this world.
we had that in the Dark Knight as well, which was
Yeah, but he
pretty
was
good.
only the Two Face. He was only Two Face for like 5 minutes at the end of that movie. You know what I mean?
When was
Like
the last time you watched that movie?
it's been a while. He's not
Yeah.
Two Face for very long. He gets
I
he
just felt
gets
like he's a
burned and then
major part of the movie though. It's those three.
yeah,
Like
he is, but
he
he's the
doesn't need
D.
to he
But
doesn't need to be Two Face for
right,
it to
he's
be
Harvey
like
Dent for most of the movie, and then he's Two Face
yes,
for like the last act, basically.
yeah,
Yeah.
which is
But
cool to see though.
what I'm saying is, I think there's room for a really cool version of a modern Two Face in this world,
Sure.
or at least even maybe a second movie where you have Harvey Dent just be Harvey Dent for the whole movie, right?
I think
You're
if
kind
we
of
see it
teasing it.
too, it's gonna be in the courtroom, and it's gonna be one of the
Hmm.
I don't forget which
Well,
mob guy does it.
it's Maroney in the comic
Yeah,
books,
it's
but he's
Monroe.
dead
Yeah,
already in this
right.
well, or no, he's not dead. He's just busted. I don't know if we know if he's dead or not,
I
but he
love in
was
Batman Forever. Like, there's like you can see on the TV like that happening.
right.
Like they like show that like a glimpse, and you see Batman like trying to like lunge and like he's like in the courtroom. Like
But can you imagine
it's
Batman in a
like those
courtroom?
real moments in those
Yeah.
movies that we never got, but then we get those in this movie like everywhere,
Yes.
and it's just like somehow it works. But then some people think it's like grounded and realistic, and then some people
It's
think it's like
it's
fantastical.
not at all this movie is not realistic. There's nothing
No,
realistic about Batman.
no,
It just fits the world. And so back to Peter Sarsgaard for a second. I just love his kind of like broken. He's like he knows he sold his soul and he doesn't know how to
yeah, he just
figure
like
it out.
drunk and just like
Yeah.
lost and just like trying to have a good time when he's first
Yeah.
introduced.
Well, and he's like and he just looks so desperate. Like he just wants connection and he
But he also
can't
seems
get it.
harmless too.
Well, it's
He
because he's
seems
just a
completely
lawyer.
harmless.
He's like
Yeah.
a lawyer who gets paid 10 grand a month to turn the other way. That and he's
Also, I noticed the second time when Catwoman or Selena Kyle like calls for a
mhm.
cab, it's like a really old school like
Yes, it's 80s.
car
Yes,
from like what you always expect from Gotham. But then like
yes.
you see Gordon, he's in like a brand new
Well,
2022
that they yes,
cruiser or
yes.
like our
It's like
cop
a
cars too,
Ford.
which I
It's like
thought
a
was cool.
Ford. I think it's like Ford like style cop car. It's the
Yeah,
yeah
it's like
Focus or whatever.
which is
It's
funny.
that's what's so good about this is that it can just do whatever it needs to do. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
Peter Sarsgaard, his car is like an Audi. She gets into like an 80s Crown Royal, and like
Hmm.
and then meanwhile Batman's car looks like it's maybe from that same era. So it's like it's
Yeah.
got all these kind of
And
it can
then
be modern when it needs to be and old when it needs to be, and
with
it's fine.
Reeves with the film or whatever, like he like did some sort of thing like scanning double negative, putting
Yeah,
it through this
I
to like
read about that
achieve
too.
this like 70s look, which is pretty crazy.
Did you? So I read about that, and I thought I don't. I don't know if that's necessary. You know what I mean? Like there's all this work that they did where they basically like they ran it
They
through.
put it back on film
They put it
essentially,
back on film and then
which I
rescanned it
think
into
is
digital.
super smart. We can tell when it's digital and when it's on film.
Yes, we can.
The film is a dying art. We've talked about this before.
Hmm.
It gives the cinema like movie quality,
Grittiness.
like grittiness and cohesiveness. When it's digital, it's like they shot that with an iPhone. You know?
Well, I mean, so that's what I'm saying is I feel like so you go through this whole process to make it look more 70s, and I don't really feel like it looks that 70s. This is a very modern looking movie to me in most ways.
Yeah, it won't be till people start like screen capturing certain
Yeah.
imagery and comparing it to like movies of the 70s. Because I think there's a lot of cinematography that's pretty similar. I've seen people compare it to already.
Well, yeah, it's just
Um,
really like slow. They don't like I said, they don't cut quickly. They do long takes,
yeah,
generally
it's about the
speaking.
actors and stuff.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
just refreshing and like just so good to just like I remember thinking too, like I can't believe that there's like 2 more hours of this.
Yes,
You know
I
what I mean? I
know.
can't wait to see what the Riddler looks like. I love how they keep him like kind of secret. His reveal is amazing when they had that shot of his head sideways and like he's smiling.
I well, I mean, I think Paul Dano. I mean, I have a long history with Paul Dano as an actor. I don't really
He's
know
in
his
There
work.
Will Be Blood. He's a,
I'm looking at
like
his
combing
IMDb
man.
right now, but I just like he's in Looper. He's in I mean a lot of stuff. He's Swiss Army Man. A lot of stuff I have. Okja. He's in a
Oh
lot of
yeah,
stuff.
Looper is a big one. Yeah.
He's I, he doesn't jump off the screen at me, but I just think his performance. He has that conversation with Batman, which I think is really cool, and we can talk about it but the interrogation scene where Batman feels like the jig is up. He's like, okay, he figured out who I am, and now I just need to. He just wants to get vengeance, whatever, right? And he has this whole conversation. He does it, Bruce Wayne,
Oh
like
man,
this,
that's
all this
so
like,
crazy. I love
and
it.
it's like his constant like changing of pitch and tone, and
And everyone's
it,
listening at that moment, right? Like it's
yeah.
not just them.
Well,
Is that?
he looks up at the camera and he sees it's being recorded, and
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
what I love about it is that he's trying to not reveal any ticks, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Don't
and
re-
we know that. Like, okay, Batman wouldn't he know to just keep cool,
right.
but we can tell that he's like freaked out that
He's
he
super
knows,
nervous.
but he can't
Yeah.
do anything
Yeah,
about it.
I know. So he's like, he glances at the camera. You know that Paul Dano notices this stuff. When
Hmm.
he references Bruce Wayne, it cuts back to Batman, and his face does a little twitch.
Hmm.
Um, and I just think that, and this is something I caught the second screening. I get the impression, I don't know if you feel this way, but that he does know that Batman's Bruce Wayne, but he doesn't want to reveal it. He's choosing to hold that
Oh
information
yeah,
himself,
yeah,
which I
because
think is
his
so
plan
cool.
still there's so much more to his plan still right at that point.
Well,
Like he,
I mean, yeah, but he doesn't necessarily he doesn't care about that. What he says at the scene is that he's like everyone is trying to unmask you, but they miss the point, right?
yeah,
And I because he's blending in this idea that I know who you are, but I'm not going to say that I know because he says, "Oh, Bruce Wayne, the only one we didn't get," right? He's like, and then there's that
hmm
kind of like relaxed. He's like, "Oh my, okay, he doesn't know who I am," but it's like he
hmm
for sure does, and he chooses not to reveal it because he likes the mystery, which is, by the way, similar. This is something out of the comics. Riddler always figures out who Batman is. That's like
yeah,
it's not that hard to figure out. If you're halfway smart in that world, you could figure it out. And so I love that, and I love that they have that conversation. They touch on all these things that the movies never fucking bothered to deal with, which I think has always been the biggest mistake about these Batman movies, which is that like the duality between Batman and Bruce Wayne is fascinating. They always touch on it, but they never do it well enough. They talk about the idea that like, listen, I understand you. What I'm looking at right now is the true version of you. This is stuff that we know from the comic books all the time, right? He thinks of himself as Batman. It's the true version of himself, and that Bruce Wayne is the facade. Something that's
yeah.
like,
Riddler even says that in this.
yeah,
In
and it's like why have we waited so long for movies to
yeah,
explore
it's
this
like
concept?
yeah, those
I
lines
don't
are
understand.
like straight ripped out of like Arkham or the comics. It's
Yes,
insane. Even when
yes,
Batman's response, where he's like, "You're sick, you're twisted, like
right.
you're upset," like it's just like whatever. You remember that line where he's just like
Yeah, he's
basically
like
explaining how
you're
it's like
no
a
one's gonna remember
psychological.
you. You're gonna die in here, and you're no one's
Yeah.
and you're a psychopath. You're a twisted because it's him. It's him trying to Batman trying to like he's lashing out in a way
Yeah.
that's like he's normally punching people in the face, but he can't do that here, so he has to
Yeah.
do it like verbally, and it
Hmm.
feels really weak for Batman. It's like you would stoop to that kind of this level. It's like we've done nothing together. We're not a team. All this kind of stuff, but he's thinking about it. He's going through his head. He's replaying it. And he's thinking, "Oh
Yeah.
shit, I played right into your hands this whole time. I can see exactly why you would think that, but I can't allow myself to believe any of that. I have to know that you're a psychopath because if you're a psychopath, then it's like I can justify my actions. I'm not crazy. You're crazy. You know what I mean?
but they both look crazy.
They
Yeah,
both look
they're
crazy.
both looking at a mirror essentially.
I love how he's like, he's like, I love your mask. You never got to see me in my mask. I thought that's like he's so proud of his little like costume that he's come up
Yeah.
with, and it just like I just everything about it feels thorough and thought out, layered. It none of it feels like just, oh well, that's because they did it in the comics, then we have to do it here. If they do it, then it's explained. Why is it that
makes
way?
sense to the case.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. I think I could talk about this movie forever. I mean, I want to go back to Cobblepot. I love that they called him Oz, Ozzy, all these kind of like different kind of like
his intro line when like Batman's looking up at him and he's like smiling down and like that's our
sweetheart.
first
Yeah.
real intro.
Yes.
And when he says "Call me Oz," and
Yeah.
he's got that little that grin kind of going.
Well, he's
on.
got like golden teeth in there too, which is like super cool. Like he's clearly lost teeth, but they've been replaced by like these gold inserts.
And then for me,
stuff.
like with showing like these legendary meetings, it's like in that moment, I'm like, this is the first of many interactions that this duo essentially is gonna come across.
Because
it's so cool that we're seeing the beginning of it.
What I've always loved about the dynamic between Batman and Penguin is that Penguin is like a known criminal to Batman, but he's like a known. So he lets him kind of do things, but he's always kind of keeping an eye on him. He's always kind of sorry, what did you say?
The Iceberg Lounge, like as geeks, like nerds or whatever, like when we hear Gordon say it, that we hear Batman say it, it's like yes,
44 below,
like more.
Yeah, yeah. Like I'm like everything about, and then he go, and then I love about how they like what the Iceberg Lounge is. It's like in this old warehouse, and it like it's in this like, it's at the docks because that all fits. Everything fits, right? And then so you have this like really interesting physical portrayal of the Penguin, which we the last time we saw the Penguin in live action, played by Danny DeVito, and he literally looked like a penguin. I mean, it was like he literally had fingers that looked like penguin fingers. Like it's weird.
Yeah, it's pretty iconic look though.
I mean, sure. I feel like I think of like didn't he have like black goo coming out of his mouth at one point? I feel like that's what I remember.
Well, he just like no hygiene, like would just eat like raw fish and stuff.
Right, raw. Yeah. Ugh. Anyway, but like this is such a much more interesting. Maybe not as comic book visually accurate in the sense that like he doesn't have to have a monocle and wear a tuxedo to be called the Penguin. You know what I mean? Like he could just be a mobster who owns a nightclub. And I think that in and of itself is compelling. I love that at the end when Carmine comes out and he's like being brought into the light or whatever, and he's like, "You fucking rat," whatever. And he's like, "Oh, what do you think you're a big man now?" And he's like, "Well, maybe I am." I like everything about that.
Too, man.
Yeah. Yes.
But that's the beginning of the car chase scene, right? Like right before.
No. No. This is after the car chase. This is after that. This is where they've come to collect Carmine, right? And they've revealed that he was the rat that sold out the drug operation or whatever. And to Penguin, who is like Carmine's right hand man, he's like, "Man, fuck you. You screwed us all. Like you screwed us. And I've been working under you this whole time. Screw you." This is because Carmine is taken out in this scene. It creates that power vacuum that Catwoman mentions at the end. She's like, "It's going to be a power grab, but it's going to be bloody." Penguin's going to be at the head of that, right? This is his origin story as much as it is kind of Catwoman's and not Batman's Riddler, necessarily, but Riddler's for sure, right? So like there's these elements of like Batman has gone in, he's cut out elements of rot out of Gotham, but in its place comes new problems. So Penguin's going to be more empowered now, but Batman, like I said, he's a known. So there's going to be more meetings at the Iceberg Lounge. That's going to be another thing. By the way, I love that there's 3 separate meetings at that, or no, I guess meetings, but counters at that venue where he comes. He first shows up at Batman. He says, "Do you know who I am?" And then he's like, there's that great line about like you'll be covered in blood, and he's like, "Mine or yours?" I love that's such a good line. And then he comes again, but this time as Bruce Wayne. He says, "Do you know who I am?" Right? So the same people, which I think is super cool. And then the third time, of course, is when he comes for Carmine and he like sneaks in. This whole idea of him being Bruce Wayne but like wearing a hood and like keeping his shit in a backpack, I think is not what I expected. for this movie. Like I didn't expect to see just like a dude on a motorbike, just driving around the city, but it works, so whatever. But like I think it totally makes sense. It kind of brings you back to that idea of like being this master of disguise, right? If you're in the Batman the animated series, he always like would put on like a fake beard and all these kind of things, and he would like pretend to be like a homeless guy or whatever, a beggar, and that would like give him the intel he needed to be Batman. This has kind of had those same elements. I don't know. We haven't even talked about John Turturro. I love the idea of using John Turturro as Carmine Falcone. I love John Turturro. I think he's a massively underrated actor, just generally speaking. When's the last time you remember John Turturro? Was it Transformers?
I don't know, I guess.
Which it's like, and you can laugh at that too, but like he's pretty freaking funny in that movie too, like in that original Transformers and even the second one.
Great actor.
And so I love the look, like these kind of like these like rose-colored glasses he's wearing, and this he's not like this bulking guy with a big scar on his face. It's just this understated mobster. He's kind of like it's this, and it again this modern sleek feel that a lot of the movie has, that these characters kind of carry around, and he totally nails it. He's manipulative. He owns the room. He has that moment where he snaps at that guy when he comes in when he's talking to Selena. So there's that little bit of anger in there. I just like I can't say enough good stuff about this movie, Jeremy. Like I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say. Like Zoe Kravitz talked about how she was passed over for the role of Catwoman for Dark Knight Rises. She feels like it's because of her skin color. And that I feel like that's a shame. I like the version of Catwoman we got in Dark Knight Rises, and Anne Hathaway's fine. I just think that like I love the gritty nature that she brings to the character. I love that. By the way, so you talk about that before the car chase. It's a brief sequence.
The ambush or whatever that.
Yes.
Holy cow! It's like that. Like that's Gotham. It's like you think you're safe or whatever. No. Like they'll come out of everywhere and they'll team up against you. And
well, and I love how he's like,
Batman have a killing, he doesn't kill anyone, I guess, but this machine that just could wreak havoc.
I just like how you have Catwoman appear and he's like, if things just got complicated, and he doesn't tell Gordon what that means. He's just like, what are you talking about? And then he's just on the roof, which is there's always like. Gordon's always on the ground and Batman's always on the roof. And it's like, we don't have to explain how he got there or anything else. I just need to know that he's up there. And so I love that right away. They're talking, the dialogue there, the back and forth dialogue between Gordon and Batman is super cool because it's just like to the point. It's like, I think they really nail it with that kind of like duet that he does with Penguin. But like, even in this scene, he's like, they're talking about how, it's a buy. They're talking about the drugs. He's like, oh, they started up his operation again. He's like, or maybe they never shut it down. It's just kind of this smart banter back and forth, this kind of like problem solving that they're doing. And he's like, what do you mean? The biggest drug up was bust? Like.
And then Batman, butting heads with like the other commanding officers and stuff.
Oh my God, Jeremy, that scene in the police station is super cool. Because I don't know the actor who plays that cop.
Well, it happens like twice, right? It's like with the one commissioner who like dies.
Well, there's the commissioner.
Then it happens with the other guy with the mustache.
Yes.
Who at that point Batman knows
is crooked.
The whole guard when he died, right? He's like, it's bigger than you'd ever imagine. Like it's the whole system. Like
yes.
That led to Batman like thinking all these things.
Well, I love that the guy with the mustache, his performance is like this raspy voice. It's so cool. It's like you're gonna go to bat for this freak. You know what I mean? Like they're all kind of doing this kind of like really thick New York accent, which is totally fine with me. I think it totally works for Gotham stuff. And he gets up off the table and he's like, he has to like get away from these cops, and he's like, look, now he's like, I got you on assaulting an officer. He's like, you've got me on assaulting 3. He's like, that's what a badass line, first of all. And then there's this whole thing where they have this little conversation with Gordon. He's like, let me talk to him. I'll figure him out. And it's like, then they have a little plan. He's like, well, because you punched me in the face. Like
Man,
every element of that
when
works.
they're talking there, it's nuts. Like their
Yes.
heads are so close to one another,
Yes.
and they're just like dancing around, and like their
Pretending.
like their foreheads are almost touching. Is
Mhm.
a really cool thing that they're
I love
pulling
that he
off
keeps
there.
calling him man, which I
Oh
think
yeah,
is really fun. Like I love
let's
Jeffrey
go,
Wright
man.
in everything. He's like, and that scene where he's like, where Batman's like, no guns. He's like, yeah, man, that's your thing. like what a great line reading that is.
Yeah.
I what did you think of the Batcave? Did you like this version? I didn't. I mean, we barely get to see it, but there's
Yeah,
bats in it.
I liked like how it led it, like when he's on the motorcycle and he's going around the
Yeah.
city, and I just liked how it like it they panned up to like Wayne Tower, clearly iconic looking with like the bat ears
Yes.
almost on it, like from the Arkham games. And he doesn't even like linger on it at all. Like we just see it for like a millisecond, then he just like cuts away. But then it's really cool how he's just like going down like this super intricate path that obviously is abandoned and no one will get there, and it's like under Wayne Tower or whatever. So I think that's kind of cool, like
Yeah.
in the heart of Gotham.
Yeah.
And then I love seeing the Batmobile under the white tarp there, just like
Yeah.
you can see the silhouette of it,
Well, they
that
tease
muscle
it a
figure in the
couple times.
wings.
Like there's a couple times where they
You
show
see the
like
engine,
the engine and car
yeah.
parts laying around, and he's like clearly building it, which I think is super cool. I love that there's bats in it. I think that's always like kind of need those, but like it's in real life, if you had bats everywhere, your shit would be covered in guano, and it's like it's like
But the
toxic and
movie's
stuff.
not realistic.
But it's not
Remember?
realistic, so it doesn't matter. So like I just like that's like it's just visually cool to have bats in the Batcave, obviously, right? And obviously there's that line from Zoe Kravitz for Catwoman, and she's like, "What do you live in a cave?" You know, like that's cool. I don't like everything about it feels like you said thought out. I love, by the way, talk about the Wayne Tower. There's that moment where Batman figures out what's happening and he's going after Bruce Wayne as the next thing, and he's trying to call
Yes.
Alfred.
And it
And
already happened.
I love that. Is that not the
Yeah,
coolest? It's
That's
like
so cool. Like, it's because the reveal, because we're getting excited to
yes,
look to see the tower, and
yep,
we see the fire and the smoke, and it's like,
yes.
okay, that shit already happened.
It's manipulative, but in like a satisfying way because it's like
because you're in Batman's perspective and timeline
yes,
and head. Because like
yes,
you don't like right now he can't help him,
right.
but he
Because
doesn't
it
know
like
if it happened or
it's
not.
tricking you in a lot of ways because it shows you that he's
Yeah,
calling Alfred, and you can hear the phone ringing, and it cuts to
the
the phone
package.
on the thing.
Yeah.
But then it shows you Alfred with the package, and you can hear the phone ringing. It's like, why isn't he answering the phone? But it's because the phone's not ringing at that time. But it's like it's
yeah.
tricking you. It's bullshit. But it's like, but like I said, it totally works because
But they also make it seem like he died. Like they wait for a couple like
yes,
cuts or whatever sequences
you don't know
till
right
we
away.
see him in the hospital bed,
And
which
I
I thought
think
was a
that's
little bit cheap. But
it is, and it's like I'm like, well, they gonna kill Alfred in the first movie. I'm like, that's a pretty
yeah,
bold choice, so, you know,
yeah,
like, but they're like, oh, well, they have that maid character, so maybe she'll take over. But then they kind of did a similar thing later when Batman like cuts that electrical wire, and it's like, oh,
oh
he's
yeah,
dying. He sacrificed himself for like half. It's literally not even like as long as they gave the Chewbacca death scene and as a Skywalker, you know, where it's like he's like, why are we playing the sad music and watching him like
because
fall back?
it's his rebirth when he's like his
Right.
baptism when he comes out of the water. He's all
Yes.
about hope now.
Yeah. Yeah. Did the hope thing was? I thought the hope thing was really good, but it's pretty funny. It's like, isn't that kind of Superman's thing? Like we're really gonna lean into that right now.
Yeah,
He's like, it's not about vengeance. That's not gonna save
yeah.
anybody.
Which I
You know,
also
or
love how they joked about the nickname, which made
Mr.
it kind of
Vengeance. Yeah.
yeah, like Catwoman would say it in a cheeky way,
Yeah.
and then Penguin would like say it like in
Yes.
a demeaning way, like
Well,
you're nothing. But
which is why it's like we heard him say that at the very first scene, right? He's like, I'm vengeance. And but he never says that again, so it makes it implies that he said it like it's his catchphrase. You know, like he said it in front of Selena, and he said it in front of like they're aware of him using that line. Otherwise, like why would they call him that? Which I think is really funny if you think about it that way, because Batman would definitely do that, like in the comic books. So I don't know. Everything about this works. I don't know. for me, like I said, this is a 10 out of 10 movie. Like I'm trying to think about things that don't work for me. Sure, and knowing full well that this is a Batman that's kind of catered specifically to me, in almost every way. So like I'm kind of like a little biased in that way. So like I I don't think I can look at this from a completely unbiased standpoint. But like your criticism about the finale not having that kind of like grandeur that it needed, for me it totally works because like you said before, it's this kind of like rebirth, but it's also there's that moment with the mayor where she's like, everybody in the city is afraid to do the right thing, and I'm going to do the right thing. I think that scene, even though it's only like 30 seconds long, I think that totally kind of like nails everything that it's trying to accomplish there. It's talking about where the city's at in its current time, what needs to change for that to happen, and Batman, his actions having to reflect those things. Like just that one scene where she does get shot anyway, which I think is cool. She survives, which is good. But like, there's like
It just
all
doesn't
those elements are
feel
working
like
together.
if you want to actually compare the Dark Knight, like just the finale with Gordon, Batman, Two Face, like how that plays out and how Batman like is like the fall guy for it. Like it just
Mm-hmm.
makes so much sense for that character and that realistic approach of that like kind of short
Well, I
time
guess yeah.
window world.
It's hard to
And
beat
it's
that
so
sequence. That's
cool.
true. Yeah.
And then with the
But
with the music from Hans Zimmer,
yeah.
it's just it's astounding, really.
Well, I
So
guess like
to me, that was like if you can compare and go back, right? That's
mm-hmm.
kind of where I was at the end of this movie. It's like it didn't really live up to what it kind of set out to be. It just kind of going to
It just
continue on,
yeah.
and it's not like a huge revelation other than okay, I'm all about hope now. So that's my only pushback towards where I don't like. But again, that's not like my overall feeling of the
Sure.
thing. It's just
It's
that's
a critique.
unfortunate
It's
for
a
me for the ending. But
yeah. I can see that. I think for me it works because it's kind of like I'll use a video game reference here, Jeremy. Um, it's kind of like how you could have a game where it's like, here's all the tools for you to succeed in a game, right? Here's you can upgrade all these things, and you can here's all the gameplay stuff that you need to know to succeed. But when you get to the final boss, throw that all out because we're going to do something completely different, right? I don't know. I've never found that to be completely very compelling. But in a game where it's like, well, what we'll do instead of giving you one big final boss, we'll just throw a million enemies at you because you now know how to beat them, and enough of them at a time is challenging in and of itself. The Arkham games did this sometimes, and I think it works better because it's just showing you, hey, Batman's been doing all these things this whole time. We've been showing him his skills. Here's all of them at once, like shown to you in one sequence, right? Instead of there being this like big standoff, this big conversational. Like we already had the conversation between Riddler and Batman, so that's kind of been done. This is just him cleaning up the mess, and
yeah,
so I think that for me it works,
and
but
then
I
he
can
uses
see
Venom.
that's well, I think it's just adrenaline.
It's green.
You think it's Venom? You think they're
It's
teasing Venom
it's
there?
green, and he gets angry.
Yeah, I mean I don't know. They don't tell you what it is, but I do like that he has a little like slot on his suit for stabbing himself in the leg, which I
Yeah,
think is cool.
I was overanalyzing that too. It's like, well, but wouldn't you just have like a button to where you could easily press to where it just injects? Because
Right.
like, what if it's in your pouch and like you can't get to it because you're so incapacitated or whatever?
Jeremy,
You know,
you send me these images, and are these are things that you have purchased already, or no? Are these just things you want to have?
that's the comic that I got
Yeah. Okay.
from the movie,
Yeah.
and then the
Cool.
action figure to the left was on sale for $12.
Okay, that's
And
cool.
then that's Batman Year One, a new commemorative edition
Right.
that they released this month, which has a cool new cover.
Yeah. Okay.
And
4K
then I
Blu-ray,
bought,
which you don't
and then
normally buy, but that's true. That's
I
cool.
do now, and then I
Yeah.
got
The Batmobile.
the yeah, which is pretty cool.
It says "Try me." What happens when you press "Try me"?
It lights up and makes sounds.
That's super cool. I love this Batmobile. Like I just like it look and
Yeah, I'm obsessed with it.
Okay, so I'm thinking about all the gadgets he uses. He has his grapnel gun, and they don't. It's like attached to his wrist, which I think is a really cool kind of like makes sense kind of addition to that thing, which is just always on your arm, which I think is really I think that's a cool addition to that. He has the eyelid thing, the little contact lens camera thing, which is really cool. The suit itself is basically bulletproof. So that's that. He gets shot so many times, Jeremy. It's insane. So that's cool. He's got the squirrel suit that like his cape turns into a squirrel suit. So that's really cool. What else?
Wouldn't it have just been better if he just like used his cape?
Well, yeah, but like they haven't really
glided?
established that. I guess you could just do what. I guess you could just do whatever.
But why do they have to establish it if they're not trying to be realistic?
Yeah, I don't know.
Isn't
That's a
that
good point.
Isn't that gadget like a Batman Begins, Nolan-esque?
I would
type
agree with
thing?
that. That one's the one that feels like the most like real world out of everything that's like here.
Yeah.
Like if his cape just worked as a glider, I would have been fine with that too.
And like it would have been sick. Like just see him glide off into the night. Like
well, I love how
just
at
been so cool.
that moment where maybe that'll come, Jeremy, right? Like maybe that's like the next iteration. But like I love how he gets to the roof. He's like, holy shit! He's like he does not want to jump off of there instantly. So I think that all that stuff is cool. I love that, by the way. He has the little earpiece for Selena Kyle. It's in this like little glowing blue tube. I thought that was cool. Anytime he has a little timer. He had like a little time bomb thing that he puts on that. He like creates gas with it or whatever. I think anytime you have a sticky bomb, Batman's got to have those. What did you think? Here's the question: what did you think of his like bat symbol that's also a knife?
It just didn't like. I don't know if you're supposed to be like an obvious like reveal for it,
right?
Like it just felt like it was not really. Like we didn't really pay attention to it as like this super crucial device. It's just like he just uses it.
Yeah.
And it's
well,
like,
the first time he uses it to cut into the police tape to get back into a crime scene. That like, and that's like the big reveal. It's like, and then he puts it back in his chest. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool.
I absolutely love the crime scene in the beginning.
Jeremy, every crime scene is cool in this movie. Like,
no, but like when he's walking in, like the first kind of like sequence of him, like when you're talking about like how he's just silent, and like even when he looked at like the indent on the ground. Then like someone with a picture like sees it and then takes a picture of it.
Yes. Yes.
And then later on in the movie, he says that like it's the murder weapon used by the Riddler for what's his name.
Right.
You'll if you measure the the dimensions of it and the floor markings, you'll see that it matches up.
It matches.
It's like, I just know like people like me and you are like in our heads just like yes, like
that's I'm imagining Kevin Conroy's voice saying those things because it totally fits to that version of Batman.
But in the moment we're still giving Pattinson like props for like
absolutely the line readings are great.
Writing too, but it's still cool the way he
well I mean everything about it, like there's even at that first crime scene because he's like they cut off his thumb and he's like it was cut off while he was still alive.
Oh yeah.
And by the way, I love when they're like go back and they find the cars underneath, and he's like, I'm looking for a USB drive, and Gordon's like, USB. He's like thumb drive, and it's just like these like really stiff in a good way, like readings from Batman. It's like he does not need to describe anything further than just say thumb drive, and it's like okay, that's funny and grim at the same time, which is kind of like that perfect balance that you're looking for. I can't wait to see. There's a lot of like, I just can't wait to see what comes next. Like, and so if it's whether it's Court of Owls, whether it's Mr. Freeze, whether they really lean into this Joker thing, I really hope they don't. I hope that's something like, and it's not to say that I don't like, because Jeremy, are you aware who played Joker in that final end credit scene?
I already saw like the rumor before, like when they were shooting and stuff.
Oh, really?
And then that they were testing it with test audiences, and then I guess it was scaled back, or this is just like the version they decided to go with. But this is a very subdued, like it's not really a reveal, quote unquote, because it's in darkness. But you can tell that he has a fixated like smile at all times. I don't know if you could tell.
Yeah, there's a there's a real like prosthetic look to whatever's going on
Yeah, and
there.
then I read an interview. Matt Reeves said he wants his Joker to have basically a smile at all times,
Interesting. Okay.
which I think it does happen in the comics. I forget
Yes.
which storyline, but it is a thing.
There's a couple of them
So
where like there's the version of Joker just always kind of like got that like shit-eating grin on his face. I
yeah, and I
mean,
guess even with Jack Nicholson, it's like kind of
yeah,
permanent. But
but
it'll
like
be interesting to see how they like with this version, like how wide is it, how big is it, and like how do you talk or emote if you have like kind of a prosthetic thing going on, but yet to be determined.
I mean, what I'm saying is I don't want them to lean. I don't want the next movie to be a big standoff
Sure.
with Joker because it's like we've done that. I want like what was so cool about this was that it was that Riddler was not something that a version of this Riddler has not something we've seen before. A grounded version of the Joker is something we've seen before. I don't want to see another grounded version of Dr. Crane. I don't want to see another like I'm I
Well,
will
I
like
think it would
I'm
be
open to
cool
it,
that I
but
think it would be cool if Joker appears in the last iteration if it is a trilogy. I mean, for some
mhm.
reason, I feel like it should be 4 movies now. Like just thinking with the Rogues Gallery and like
Right.
how
Yeah.
much attention you need to pay to one villain for a movie, and like you get one more movie out, you only have one left. But like having Joker in Arkham saying these things, right? Because he's alluding to bigger
Mhm.
things,
Yeah.
is pretty cool.
Yes.
Knowing eventually if he breaks out of there,
Yeah.
and how that works, and
I
Harley
mean,
Quinn potentially.
I'm not against it in like the strictest sense. What I don't want the Batman 2 to be is just like, oh,
Yeah,
this is his
adhering to
version
those
of the Dark
things.
Knight. I don't need that. You know what I mean? Like and
Hmm.
not saying that that's what it would be, but it would certainly invite a lot of comparisons that I don't think it needs to invite. Like it has so much room to do its own thing that I would just love it to just kind of like forge its own path. You have a Batman that is so fucking cool. Lean into that. What other cool shit can you do that we haven't seen before? There's so many cool villains that we haven't seen before, right? And maybe you do like a couple villains and you kind of do that idea that I kind of talked about before, which is this kind of like existing roads gallery that they can build up in this Arkham show, right? That you're kind of like they're coming in and out of the movie, right? You've got you need to get information. You go to Penguin. You need to get you see Catwoman for a little bit. Then you go to maybe there's some element of the Joker, but he's not the villain. I think Joker sometimes works well when he's not the villain, where it's like he doesn't have a full plan right now, but he's just causing havoc. I
Yeah,
think that sometimes works.
it's like in the Arkham games, right? Like the very
Yeah,
first thing that happens is like you're bringing Joker into Arkham,
yeah.
but it's like not really all it seems to be.
Well, and I think talk about that Arkham series for a second. I love the idea that you could just start building out this rose gallery. Like they're like, oh yeah, Batman has all these amazing villains. Why don't we just do a show that just deals with all these crazy villains?
Yeah,
And then
because they
you can
can't fit them all in 3 movies.
right. So you could just have Robert Pattinson kind of like pop in and out of the show, right? Where he's just like maybe he's bringing in another crazy person, right? Here's another villain or someone escaped and he's bringing them back in and there's a couple like there's kind of like behind the scenes stuff you're kind of seeing where Batman is kind of more this presence of kind of terror for these villains where it's like, oh, Batman's here again and they're kind of antagonizing him as he's kind of like walking through Arkham. Like we've seen anytime Batman's in Arkham, it's always cool. So seeing it from the other perspective, where we're not always with Batman and he's coming into Arkham, is really I think compelling and interesting. And I think would obviously make a lot of sense. Like you wouldn't even need him very often. Like an afternoon of shooting, you get him in for a couple scenes. You could do the same thing with Jeffrey Wright's Gordon, or any of these characters where you need them for little bits and pieces. You don't need them to be the focus of an entire series. I don't know. And then and Jeremy, if you really wanted to get really crazy, here's what you could do. Okay,
If
the
you're
main
nasty.
character of your Arkham show is Harleen Quinzel. She's like the psychologist who's like
Mm.
working with these people. I think that would be really, or even if you wanted to do Dr. Crane, you could kind of have like a little bit of like back and forth there. There's a lot, or you could do Hugo Strange, right? Like there's a lot of flexibility, right?
Yeah, and for me, I just want to see what inspiration Matt Reeves takes from the real world, and applies it to whatever
Right.
villain that makes the most sense. I'd almost rather just have a trilogy with no kind of offshoots and all that
Sure.
stuff. I think that it'd be more special that way. But I guess in this day and age, it's kind of hard to just shoot for
Well,
that.
yeah, because like if let's say assume Matt Reeves starts working on the second movie like today, right? Like we're another 3 years out from the Batman 2,
Hmm.
you know, and like that sucks. Like I want the next movie now, you know, like I want to know. I want this to be the, you know, where's the part 2 of this that we can see in like 6 months,
And then
you know?
yeah. So then to satiate that, I mean, I guess yeah, the Penguin show, whatever that is, will be that tease, that midway point,
Yeah, yeah.
and then maybe an Arkham tease or something, or that comes out same. I don't know. Who knows?
I,
But
I I think it's funny that Colin Farrell agreed to do a whole series as Penguin, because it's like you're really gonna put on all those prosthetics every single day to, to film this series, you know, like
well, it's
that.
mostly like a mask. It's like it probably isn't as bad as you think it is.
Maybe
Like
I mean I don't know.
it's probably
I
like a
just
mission. It's like a Mission Impossible mask, but then you add the accents.
yeah. I mean I gotta I like, you know, we've said this. I just think that he disappears into this role, and it's not just the
Oh yeah.
prosthetics.
He talks
It's
about how like he was like jolly about this role, and like even when he saw the mask and like all the effort that the
right.
whoever was in charge of creating that with the scars and the stories it told, he couldn't wait to just jump in that role and just have fun with it, and it
I want
clearly
people to go
shows.
look at a picture of Colin Farrell and just like, and then think about the photo, like just think about the movie that you just saw, and just be like, Colin Farrell
Yeah,
might be one of the
there's
best looking
it's
people in Hollywood. And then you this kind of this like complete transformation into Oswald Cobblepot. Like what? And by the way, what a bold casting choice, because it's like, why, like what makes you
I
think
think
that?
Jonah Hill was actually up for the role at one point.
I would have hated that. I would have hated it.
Yeah.
And nothing against Jonah Hill, but his performances when he's trying to be like that sleazy like bad guy is just, I find it to be completely, I just don't, it's just unbelievable to me. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I've seen him too much as the comedic character, and I've seen him too much like grow up with him. But like
Hmm.
it just does not work for me. So I'm just glad I'm just glad that that's not the case here. I, you know, more power to him. But I think that what Colin Farrell is bringing with that accent, with every moment with the Penguin is compelling. Like he steals
Hmm.
those scenes even with Batman. I think that's the exactly what you need out of the character of the Penguin. And I don't know. This is what I said before. Like there's nothing wrong with this movie. We talked about the music. Michael Giacchino is, I think, another kind of composer that is just the peak of his game. Like, you know, between Rogue One, between the Spider-Man stuff, now Batman, it's like, what can't this man do? You know, like I he hasn't quite reached that level of like gravitas maybe as some of those, you know, the older crowd in the space. But I just love his work. I just think he's figured out a way to create themes for characters that fit the movies, and they don't just feel like it, he's writing music for a character that, and we're going to apply it to a movie. It's like it all fits together in a cohesive way. Like it fits the tone. And then, by the way, talk about themes. You can use it fast. You can use it slow, and that kind of is the brilliance of what he's doing here.
I like how when he's in the Batcave, he like turns down the Nirvana song
Yeah.
uh,
Yes.
when like the newscast is happening.
Did did you were you surprised that there was in the actual movie, that they used it in the movie itself, or is it just like too good of a song to not?
No, I was happy with it because I think even once the second trailer came out or the third
Yeah.
or whatever, like, oh okay, there
We're
this is it.
continuing
Like
with that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And Matt Reeves even talked about how he would listen to that song when he was writing it, and even when Michael Giacchino was done with some pieces, he would send them over, and Reeves would write to those pieces that
Mhm.
would eventually end up in the movie and give him inspiration. And he said Robert would ask him for him too, and Pattinson would listen to the music as well, preparing for the role. So
Yeah.
it's just cool when you hear these creators like really relishing in all this the art form that everyone brings to the table and just kind of mix it up.
Yeah. Um okay, any final thoughts here before we kind of close out? I feel we've kind of said, I like I said, I can continue talking about this movie forever. There's just so many
Yeah, I
elements.
mean, I kind of want to go to IMAX again to see it like at
Yeah, me too.
some point.
Me too.
Um,
I we didn't even talk about this idea of the city having this like seawall and you talk about like modern elements, like this idea of like a rising ocean, and they have to build a seawall to like keep the ocean from flooding the city.
Yeah, I think that
I
that happens in the Snyder Capullo storyline. I'm pretty sure is
it just
Riddler is a part of like a flooding of the
it's
city.
super cool, yeah, because it creates Zero Year where the whole city becomes
Yeah,
like this like wasteland
it's a
essentially.
bit of No Man's Land too, which is a book that I read when I was younger. I
Yes,
remember that was
yeah, well
cool.
that's and they kind of deal with that in Dark Knight Rises, which is
Mm,
that idea where they blow up all the bridges and stuff.
yeah,
Um, I don't. I just like this idea of this kind of this again the version of Gotham that they've created. The this it all ties back into Thomas Wayne's kind of renewal fund, which I think is like I love that how that comes full circle. Everything feeds into everything else in this movie, which I is what makes it so compelling. Like okay, it's like it's all about renewal, and then it's like the sins of the father will be visited upon the
mm,
son. All like these little elements are all kind of like jigsaw puzzled together. And you talk about like really cool crime scenes, like when they get to the Riddler's like apartment, he's been there the whole time. He like there's that whole thing about uh the the carpet tool, right? Because it's like
yeah,
there's these little elements where it's like he's grown up rich, so he doesn't know certain things. Like when Cena's like, "Oh, you must have grown up rich because you know." Yada yada. He's like calling her out for like selling her soul or whatever. It's like it must be easy for you to not have to make these hard decisions. And then later he's like, oh yeah, my uncle was a carpet guy, so I recognize that. He didn't recognize it, so he didn't put that together. So he
yeah,
has to like rely like these little small elements, and then he lifts up the carpet. And I love, by the way, that's the same cop he's always watching over these crime scenes, and he
yeah.
he kind of
Well,
wins him over by the end.
it's like the Flash Thompson of the No Way Home universe,
Yes,
because
totally,
he's like a
right?
fan. He's a fan of Bruce Wayne, but not a fan of Batman,
Well, but I
right?
think but Batman wins him over at the end, right? Where he's like
Yeah.
he has he
Well, it's just
he
funny
comes
because
in there,
he stops him initially, right, from going in
right?
like this
Yep.
guy's a freak, and then the next time he sees Bruce Wayne, he's like, oh hey, like he's smiling like he's starstruck.
Right. He's
But
like
it's
Bruce
funny because
Wayne
it's the
at a
same
funeral.
person. Yeah,
No less, right? So yeah, and then by the way, by the end, right, he wins him over, and I like that a lot. And then you have Gordon kind of. They don't say it specifically, but she's standing next to the mayor. He's standing next to the mayor at the end, which kind of is a reflection of that initial news conference for the original commissioner. So it's kind of this renewed sense of he's like, we need to renew faith in the people and the elected officials and all that kind of stuff. So I like that kind of reflection. And by the way, speaking of kind of elements that feel like right out of a comic book, I love that at the end of the movie, there's this in a really kind of stark contrast to what we normally see out of these movies, the Batman movies. You have a newscast where they're talking about the vigilante who is on the top of the Gotham Square garden, and he's helping people, and they're talking about him as like a hero. And it's like that's really refreshing to see Batman in the light helping people, right? He like drops her on, and there's like the National Guard is there, and then there the cops aren't antagonistic towards him. I'm sure that'll come and go, but at the end, it's really refreshing to see him cooperating with them in a really kind of like structured way. I think that's really really cool. And by the way, another moment that I think is really cool when Gordon arrives at Gotham Square Garden and is like, "Who's in charge here?" And he's like, "Everyone, be quiet." And then he basically like takes control of the situation. It's like it's a
oh
really
yeah,
kind of like great character moment for him. Okay, anyway, that's those are the last things that I
yeah. It's
wanted to
probably
say.
good.
Those are the last things I wanted to say. Okay, that's all for now. I think we'll certainly be touching on the Batman again.
Part two of the Batman next week.
That's right. When we'll have seen it for a third time and be continuing to break it all down. There's just so like I feel like like you said, we haven't really dived into the actual mystery itself, which is really cool and compelling, and I think we've made our case for this movie being like a 9 for you, but a
Hmm.
10 for me. And
It's yeah, like I said, I think I was saying a long time ago with all the elements that we knew about it that like it's in recording for sure that I said this will
yes,
be the best Batman movie to date,
well, I think
and it's
we were on
yeah,
the
no,
same
you were
page
definitely on
here.
that train too.
Yeah.
Just to allude to what you were saying before, you thought you predicted, but like we were like analyzing just how the story like was shaping up, like
Mm-hmm.
how it would be like Sherlock Holmes and how he'd be visiting, it would lead him to the next person,
Yes.
along the line.
Yeah.
It's essentially what happened here. So Yeah, so it's a fantastic movie. I love the movie.
Yeah. But
No ifs,
listen,
ands, or buts about it.
it's not a perfect movie. It's perfect to me, but I understand
Yeah,
if there's some issues. I
but
one
it's
last
all
thing.
good because we're getting more.
We're getting
It's gonna
more,
be
and
great.
it's just gonna get better. Like look at Matt Reeves' Planet of the Apes movies. They got better. Every single one got better as it went on.
He only did the two of them, right? Like I don't think he did
He
all
did the
three, right?
second and the third, yeah.
Yeah,
But
second and third.
the third one's amazing. I mean, they're both of
And
them are
then I
so
was
good.
a massive fan of Cloverfield. I mean, I know we were talking about it one time on the movie
Yeah, I don't know.
club,
Maybe I need to revisit
and
it.
Rachel was saying that she like hated it, but like I think that was around the time when I was like in film school, and I just love the idea of this found footage type, adventure essentially with like this
Hmm.
creature that was hidden, and yeah, that was his first big movie. I'm pretty sure that he directed.
Yes, like he's known for Let Me In, War for the Planet of the Apes, Dawn for Planet of the Apes, and Cloverfield. He's done some television, Tales from the Loop, which is I should watch those actually. I think he's produced
It's
those. Let me
just
see.
like now, sky is the limit. Like this, he's solidified
Felicity.
himself.
He hasn't done
It's
that much stuff, and maybe
Yeah, no,
that's
but
why
like
we
I'm
haven't
just saying
given him
with
credit.
this one now, it's like his agent's gonna be working like he can do whatever he wants now.
Right? Yeah,
He'll be doing Batman for the next 6 years probably,
yeah.
or whatever they decide to do with the next two, and then yeah,
I think if I can steal a line from another podcast, he'll have a blank check to do whatever he wants once this is all done. And I think we're all going to be better off for it. And I think that's really exciting.
yeah,
One last thing I wanted to say about about the Batman. I thought it was hilarious when when Batman and Catwoman go back to her apartment and she just pours a glass of milk
mm-hmm.
because like no one fucking drinks milk just on its own like that. So I don't know.
Well,
I thought it
Michelle
was like,
Pfeiffer drank milk too, I think.
did
And
she? I guess
yeah.
that makes sense. It's like if
Well,
you're gonna,
I think she was like slowly transitioning, and she like gulps back the whole carton or something. Like it's like meant to be like a joke.
well, I think there's that photo of Zoe Kravitz drinking milk out of a bowl, like an
Yeah.
actual cat, which is like really
Well,
weird.
she also said she watched like wildcats fighting like to
Mm.
prep for the role, see how they move and whatnot.
I, I mean, unnecessary, but a cool a
Gotta
cool
love the
thing.
commitment.
Yeah, the way she walks in this movie is like super. It's very cat like, which I think is super cool. Everything about it is great. No
Every
no
single
qualms.
thing.
I can't think of a single thing I didn't like. Okay, like I said, part 2 of this conversation will probably be next week. There'll be lots to talk about. There is actually other news that we can jump into. So look for that soon. Otherwise, we'd love to hear your thoughts and comments. Shoot me a message on Twitter at TowerBabbleCast. Head over to towerbabble.ca to find everything we do. Send us an email at towerbabblepodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to support the show, patreon.com/towerbabblecast. But we'll talk to you next week. Until then, we'll talk to you then. Bye. All right.